Invariably, the new construction managed to do something with grading to divert, interfere with.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Commission for July 20th. Can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Bessler?
Here.
Commissioner Fox?
Here.
Alderman Adams? Here. Commissioner Mason?
Here.
Commissioner Stoker?
Here.
Commissioner Marchese?
Here.
Commissioner Schaefer? Here. Mayor Appendroth?
Here. All right, we have 8. We have a quorum. I'm just looking through these. It's okay. First item is the approval of the June 8th minutes. Looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Next is our consent agenda. This entails 5 items. The first one is Glenn Weekman, southwest corner of Horns Corners Road and Pioneer Road in the town of Cedarburg. The applicant is seeking approval for a 3-lot certified survey map at the northeast corner of Horns Corners Road and Pioneer Road in the town of Cedarburg. And this is before us because we have extraterritorial zoning authority in the town of Cedarburg. The second item is the Mequon Thiensville School District, Homestead High School. The applicant is requesting a fill permit in excess of 1,000 cubic yards for improvements to the outdoor athletic facilities at Homestead High School, located at 5,000 West Mequon Road. We have an individual who wishes to speak on this issue. So how about if, Jack, if you introduce this and explain the issues involved with this.
Want to remove this?
Do you want to pull that one off consent and then
Yeah.
take action on the other items?
Okay.
Yeah, I move to remove this with the consent.
Second.
Okay, we'll take it up in a minute. The next item is Highlander Estates, Wauwatosa Road and Knightsbridge Drive, fill permit in excess of 1,000 cubic yards for grading of the Highlander Estates subdivision. We have someone who wishes to speak to this issue as well. So we will pull that one off.
Move to remove that from consent.
Let's do that. Number 5 is Deep River Partners for Sardis and Trevorrow. Applicant is seeking a fill permit in excess of 1,000 cubic yards for grading requirements for the property located at 10299 Wildwood Court. I hear a buzzing.
Yours, though.
I'll speak up. The next one is D&H Land Survey for the Caston Family Trust. The applicant is seeking approval for a 3-lot certified survey map at the southeast corner of Pioneer and Davis Road. So we've removed items 3 and 4. Can I have a motion on the remaining 3?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just on number 5, isn't Wildwood the subdivision right next to the ravine where we always have specimen tree questions?
Yes, and this lot actually did have a specimen tree
And
request
this is
in
one
a
that we
few months ago,
talked about
correct?
before. Do we,
Excuse me,
worried about-
Commissioner, can you speak closer to the microphone?
Yes, I can. Phil, near the tweak, is there any additional concerns with having a fill permit in that area, since that's already seems to have been kind of a sensitive development area, that specific development?
This lot's on the west side of the road,
Okay.
and the lot is actually lower than what the grading plan allows it to be. So they're just
You
bringing,
have to
basically
bring it
the
in
fill is
order
coming in
to-
to bring it up to the approved grading plan. So
Okay.
not concerned about this one.
Okay, that was my only question. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those 3 items are approved, and we'll go back to the Mequon Thiensville School District fill permit. If you like, I'll have Mr. Wallerstein speak. Maybe you can answer his questions if he has.
Sure.
Bob Wallerstein, Parkview Drive. Bob?
Thanks for calling me Mr. I'm really impressed. Hello, my name is Bob Wallerstein. We're living in Mequon here, closing on 44 years. When we moved in to our subdivision, we were the young kids. Now I'm the senior citizen needing glasses. Basically, a neighbor of mine wrote an email to me, which I believe you all were copied, but I'm going to read it into the minutes. Dan Collins, who's my next door, well, 2 doors away, actually. There's a creek that runs by our property, and I'll give you a little synopsis of what this entails. It's a runoff creek from the high school. Under normal circumstances, it's virtually dry. After a rainstorm, the water level could rise 3 feet, 4 feet in a flash. When we moved in 25 years ago to the home we're living now, you could jump across the creek. Now a kangaroo couldn't jump across the creek. Saying that, the concern is if there's any impact that would increase the flow of water to that creek, and there's a secondary creek, but it's probably wouldn't be affected by it, which is about 300 yards west of that. But here's the letter from Dan Collins, my neighbor, who lives at 4811 Parkview Drive. Dan Collins is a professional engineer, and again, he asked me to read this into the minutes. He has several points, actually 6 points. Number 1, 3,000 cubic yards is a lot of fill which would likely require 300 or so large dump trucks. For further reference, the courtesy notice regarding this meeting would have been 3 times as helpful if you have stated 3,000 cubic feet anticipated rather than saying in excess of 1,000. So basically what he says in here is they're asking for excess of 1,000. Well, excess of 1,000 is 3 times that, which is 3,000 yards. Please confirm that the fill is a stone and not crushed concrete. Do you have or need air quality permitting or notification? Number 3, will changes the amount of total impervious surface occur? Will changes to the amount of parking or parking runoff occur? Number 4, chances to drain and grading are contemplated by these plans. Will any change in the expected stormwater load occur to any of the current surface stormwater exits? He's an engineer. And is the water that is currently going to one of the existing creeks, which is the one by our house, now going to be sent to another or existing creek? What type of calculations were performed regarding the creeks that run from the site to an address changes in the water load? These creeks are currently extremely flashy and can gain 4 feet in a matter of hours, creating property and personal hazards. These creeks run adjacent to several properties before discharging into the Milwaukee River. Number 5, the runoff discharge into the Milwaukee River has review of applicable NR 151 regulations been performed. This might include section 151.10 through 151.25 that also might include sedimentation calculations, nutrition management plans. And finally, number 6, does the property currently file NMP and performs applicable soil tests? If so, could you kindly direct me to these documents? Kind regards, Dan Collins, P.E., professional engineer, 4811 West Parkview Drive. I want to give everybody, I think you got copies of this by email, but I made copies here.
Bob, we have
I think we
copies.
have them.
We have copies. We have copies. We all have copies, and they all have answers.
That's basically what we have to say on this issue, but my house basically is approximately 22 feet away from the creek. And one time, maybe 15, 18 years ago, during a 100-year storm, we had a sandbag. We didn't need it, but we sandbag as precautions. So anything that would change the amount of flow of water into that runoff creek could be pretty hazardous to our home. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to let the engineering department answer those questions.
Yeah.
The brief synopsis is no, we're not increasing the flow of water in the creek, but I'll let engineering.
Sure. So we received a copy of these questions this morning, and we provided responses to the Planning Commission members. I don't believe we got them back to, is it Mr. Hanson? The gentleman who sent over the questions. We will provide him with the responses tomorrow.
Okay.
But for his first question, well, he's asking about the 3,000 cubic yards and why we didn't state in the letter that it was, the threshold was 3,000 cubic yards. Any fill permit that is in excess of 1,000 cubic yards ends up going to Planning Commission. So that's what the postcard that's sent out states. We don't cite specific volumes of earthwork for projects. So that's why we didn't say 3,000 cubic yards. That's why we said 1,000 cubic yards, because that's the requirement. For the second point, please confirm that the fill is stone and not crushed concrete. It will be crushed aggregate base course or crushed stone. His second question to that point is, do you have any or need any air quality permitting or notification? The material will not be crushed on the site, so air quality permitting is not required. His third point is, will changes in the amount of total impervious surface occur? The answer is yes. 2.78 acres of additional impervious surface will occur. The field surface is, or the synthetic field turf is a portion of that 2.78 acres. Will changes to the amount of parking or parking runoff occur? No, this fill permit is only for synthetic field turf and the site plan improvements. Speaking to number 4, this is kind of a long answer, and I'll do my best to keep everybody awake. The existing and proposed on-site stormwater management systems will ensure that there will be no changes in the existing load of existing ditch or Milwaukee River for up to 100-year, 24-hour rain events. An existing stormwater management pond on the property addresses the city MMSD stormwater management criteria for the site previous to the proposed athletic field improvements. The proposed athletic field improvements project and stormwater management report provide detention volume within the void space of the synthetic turf stone subbase and the perimeter under drained stone storage trench. Storms up to and including the 100-year, 24-hour storm event will be completely contained within the stone storage void space and controlled with an outlet control structure to maintain stormwater volumes at or below pre-development conditions for the proposed site improvements. The proposed site improvements and associated storm sewer discharge to the existing storm sewer on site, which discharges to the existing storm water pond on site before ultimately discharging to an existing drainage swale on the east side of Eastgate Drive. MMSD's distribution of runoff volume over a critical time period, formerly known as the volumetric method, was used in the design criteria for this site. Peak runoff rates and volumes were computed using NRCS's TR55 methodologies. So I'm sorry for that long-winded answer, but that was the response to his question. Going to point number 5, the response is both NR 151 and MMSD regulations have been incorporated into the submitted and approved stormwater management plan for this project. I'd like to add that the stormwater management plan for this site has been approved by both the city, our review consultants, and MMSD at this time. And then number 6, the response is, this property does not currently file NMPs or perform applicable soil tests, as the city of Mequon participates with the NR 151.13 requirements. The turf and garden nutrient management performance standards in NR 151.14 is not applicable. So I'm sorry to read off those responses that you do have in front of you, but it's important that they're in the minutes and everybody hears them.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on item number 3?
I move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item number 3. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Marchese.
I just want to say that stormwater management is always very controversial, and sometimes when you hear technical explanations, citizens get confused as to how can you add more impervious area but still not have any more flow going down the channels. Trust me, there are hundreds of engineers and scientists that have studied this. I would like to compliment staff for their rigorous and thorough enforcement of the stormwater rules, both Mequon's rules, and of course you have to follow MMSD and the DNR. But it is a very sensitive area to people who see the storm come in and the creek jumps up 3 feet and they go, oh my gosh. But staff is doing a good job and I want to compliment them.
Thank you.
I appreciate the detailed response to the letter from Engineer Collins. My only comment is that I agree with his statement that the notification would be more meaningful if it actually mentioned the volume of fill that's involved, because there's a big difference between 1,000 and 3,000, and moreover, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the next threshold for certain kinds of notification or regulation is 5,000 cubic yards of fill. Am I wrong?
No, it's just anything over 1,000 cubic yards goes to Planning Commission. So then the notices get sent for the Planning Commission meeting.
But there's not another threshold?
No.
5,000?
Nope.
At any rate, okay, well, what that means then is anything over 1,000 could be 10,000, for example. So, to give the potentially interested and affected neighbors a genuine, helpful understanding of what's before the Planning Commission, I think even if statute or state statute or city code doesn't require an explanation, I think it would be helpful and informative. Thank you.
And if I could add, the fill permit process in general is something as an engineering department we're looking at. There's certain things we'd like to take a look at closer to see if we can modify and change to make it a better process. So that point well taken.
Thank you.
I would just say I would agree with that. I think putting the extent of the fill beyond the statute language would be very, very useful to us in judging the individual projects.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And item 3 is adopted. We move on to item 4, Highlander Estates, and we have Susan Black, who wishes to speak on this issue. Susan?
My name is Susan Black, and I've been a Mequon resident at 11016 North Knightsbridge Drive for 19 years. I am asking that the Planning Commission consider an alternate route for Highlander Estates construction traffic. It's my understanding that Swan Road is to be the second entrance to the project. Why wasn't use of Swan Road considered as primary access to Highlander Estates for all phases of development, especially now, starting out when things like road and other heavy construction must take place? Changing construction access to Swan Road would not disrupt lifestyles for residents of Brighton Ridge, Knightsbridge Estates, or Knightsbridge Crossing subdivisions, while use of that narrow gravel strip as constructed last week can only lead to problems both for current subdivision residents and for construction equipment drivers. The entrance to Knightsbridge Estates from Wauwatosa Road is already challenging due to the elevation change at the median strip. To avoid this quirky bend, drivers will get smart and also use Lincolnshire Drive to turn off Mequon Road, driving through Knightsbridge Crossing to get to Highlander Estate, impacting the families of not one but two mature Mequon subdivisions. Young children play in the driveways across from the gravel strip and ride bikes in the subdivision streets. There is significant pedestrian traffic as residents walk their dogs and otherwise enjoy the current communities. And what about the mud and debris brought in by the construction vehicles? Or what if drivers fail to execute the right angle into Highlander Estates and further damage the look of Knightsbridge Estates subdivision? We will have to tolerate this situation for years until developers can justify establishing access to their project from Swan Road. Wouldn't it be more accommodating to avoid the access problem in the first place by starting rather than ending with use of Swan Road? I am asking that before the Planning Commission approves the permit fill, that you have the developers evaluate changing primary construction entrance to be Swan Road. It would also be appropriate for the developers of Highlander Estates to work with the Homeowners Association of Knightsbridge Estates, Knightsbridge Crossing, and Brighton Ridge so as to minimize impact of their project going forward. We have never heard anything from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Black. Jack?
Well, as the commissioners may recall, the subdivision preliminary plat and development agreement was approved a number of months ago. The phasing for the project does start off of Wauwatosa and does go west toward Swan. That's primarily driven by the sewer, which will be running up Wauwatosa Road. First phase, we've just about reached the final version of the development agreement, and the preliminary plat is ready for stamping as approved. So we're pretty much done with that phase. It was approved. I'm not sure. I mean, we can't go back at this point to look at alternative routes. I think we can limit access to coming through Lincolnshire and getting to the site. But in terms of the primary route off of Wauwatosa Road, I think we've already established that as part of the development agreement that was already approved at this point. So this is in front of you for fill permit that will comply with the grading plan. Now that the engineer has the cut and fill done for the site, there is a fill that's needed to be brought in, and that's why it's in front of you. And I'll let James kind of update you on that.
Yeah, to kind of elaborate, the fill brought in, and it's in the report, is 30,100 cubic yards. And that's not just dirt that's going to be used to build up the site. That's going to be trench backfill for the utilities. That's going to be roadway base for the roadways they're going to build. That's incidental to construction. A couple other things, along with the development agreement, the developer's required to post a road bond. So they'll be posting a financial guarantee for any damage they would do to the city-owned street in case, the trucks that would be hauling this material in would crack a roadway or cause any damage to a roadway. There will also be an erosion control permit that will be issued, that will be administered through the engineering department, which will allow us to track them down for cases like, excessive road dust, anything like that on the site that would be a nuisance to the adjacent subdivision. The stone pad that right now is used as access to the subdivision is a tracking pad, which is supposed to clean the tires off the trucks as they're coming in and out of the site. That will require constant maintenance by the contractors to make sure it's working correctly. At one point, we did have a discussion with WISTOT as far as where the access should be. This was their preferred access point. And since they have jurisdiction over 181, or State Trunk Highway 181, this is where the access ended up going.
And the fill here is just for the first phase of the project?
Just for the first phase, correct.
Right, so there'd be no point in going to Swan Road because this phase of the project is actually directly adjacent to Wauwatosa Road.
Correct.
And they have a route that they have to follow, and so they will not be driving fill trucks through Knightsbridge Estates.
Correct, yeah, we establish a haul route with the contractor.
Paul, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Fox?
How many truckloads would you estimate all that fill and materials would put through Knightsbridge?
You get about 10 cubic yards per truck, so about
You had how many thousands cubic yards?
30,000,
30,000?
correct?
You're talking about a lot of trucks.
300.
Truckloads.
Yep.
And that is a less than optimal entrance to the Highlander Estates as it is, as we've all discussed. And now we're going to put all these trucks through Knightsbridge as well?
Yeah, it
For the
is,
convenience of the developer?
pardon?
For the convenience of the developer?
Not for the convenience, it's
I
the
understood
only,
you to say it was his preferred access.
no, the Department of Transportation's,
DOT?
DOT, yes. Yeah, they would not allow another access point onto Wauwatosa Road, so.
Well, I understand that, but to the point of the resident, is there anything preventing access from Swan Road, other than the distance?
Well, the distance is a big factor, but it would be illogical to track trucks across, I don't know how many linear feet that would be to get to the very east side of the development to start constructing a sanitary sewer system. The sanitary sewer and the utilities have to start from the east of the development, because that's,
Yeah.
otherwise you'd be trucking all the way through, and you would create more
But
dust.
would it be
and
possible to
noise.
divide the trucking between the two entrances, putting those that had to be out of the sewage from the east side and the rest from the west?
I would recommend, for that last phase that abuts up to Swan, that would be something to certainly consider. But for these early phases that are on the east side of that piece of land, it makes the most sense to bring the material in from that east side.
Well, it seems like a lot of burden to Knightsbridge, who objected to begin with this approach. And we were left without an alternative because of DOT. And now we're saying DOT's going to put this inconvenience on them as well.
Yeah,
1,000 truckloads is a pretty impactful experience for an adjacent subdivision, pre-existing.
it's the nature of construction. The contractors can do certain things to keep dust down. They can water down the access roads and things like that on their site, which do have a big impact on the amount of dust and things like that. But, that's how all the infrastructure in the area was constructed, so it's the nature of the construction.
Quick question. When I look at this map, obviously, this subdivision does have a little access theoretically for Wauwatosa, but the DOT won't allow it.
Correct.
Could there be a temporary one? Just, I understand that there's certain parts they might have to go down on these bridges, but couldn't there be a temporary dirt road or whatever for them to get in and out during construction? And then we'll make the entrance and exit onto the Knightsbridge like they want it?
I believe we approached that subject with VISTOT, and the answer was no from them.
Can we pursue that answer a little bit more? It's one thing when you ask and they say no, it's another one if you, kind of,
Right.
if
No,
there's any way we could help you be proactive.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's something that could be asked of the DOT. And certainly be willing to ask the question. Absolutely.
Well, is it too late to ask that?
It may be, and that's why I'm reluctant to really commit to saying whether or not they would give us the right, the answer we're looking for.
Well, tonight, we're just approving the fill.
Correct.
This is just side conversation, but
Okay.
it has to come up sometime, and I'm glad
Certainly,
the residents
yeah.
came up tonight. I would think we would still give the approval for the fill because of its need of infrastructure and roads and
Yep.
everything. Obviously, we want it to be a successful subdivision, but I would still see if there's any way, because that fill's not going to be rolling in tomorrow,
Right.
that we could maybe just have a temporary road, and you could, the planning commission would like that, or, the mayor, maybe.
We could certainly contact our friends at the DOT and see if they would work with us on that.
Just bring it up again.
Absolutely.
That's a good idea.
Even if maybe you brought the fill in on Knightsbridge and then drove straight out to
As an exit?
Wauwatosa with the empty truck,
That's a good thought, too.
Mr. Marchese.
During the process of review, preliminary plats and street layouts, I know that you consider stormwater management and all of the requirements for silt fencing, tracking pads, and all of the rest of that. On these large subdivisions that are going to have at least 3 phases, which could last 3 years, 4 years, have you ever looked at a kind of like a construction access plan? I don't think it's required, but a lot of big developments will actually sit down and do that sort of plan. I mean, for example, if you look at Summers Construction down the street, they had a big sign, construction traffic only, because they wanted to route all construction traffic a different way, and I'm sure that's so it doesn't interfere with their customers. But I wonder if that would be possible as Mequon moves forward with, what have we got, 3 of these large subdivisions? I mean, even if you could kind of come up with a phased construction access plan so that the builder would know what he's up to, and then could kind of include that obviously in his price and his planning. For example, maybe halfway through phase 2, you could ask him to switch the construction access over there. Would that be possible to do as the rest of these? I'm pretty sure you're going to have fill permits on some of the other subdivisions too.
Yes, we absolutely will, and I think it's a great idea. We're in the process of updating our standard specs for development, so this would be something we could also incorporate into there, so it's a requirement that's known when they approach development in the city. So, you know, clearly there's a certain threshold where it should become active, but when you have potentially 3 different subdivisions under development at the same time, it might be a good idea. So yeah, we will definitely take that into consideration, work with our developers to try to get, a plan in the meantime, and then we'll also consider for our standard specs.
So I know, so fill aside, because we've gotten a little bit away from the fill, which is okay, because we'll have to get here eventually anyway. Would you need to work with the developer right now and say, hey, this came up and, people are concerned, and can you make sure that, would we have to put in the final plat some of the requirements around what you mentioned, James, about, watering down, or just things to minimize the impact? What, do we formally write that in so that they know that that's something that's expected, or is it just courtesy that we expect that they would do it?
To a certain level, that's going to be policing on the behalf of the engineering department. We have our erosion control permit, which we administer, and they're subject to the terms of. So we will certainly be working with them to try to heat off some of these concerns.
So you can let them know that there's already, I would hope that they are already well aware of what has been raised in getting to just this point. So I'd hope they'd be extra cautious.
Yep, we will certainly work with them if there's issues that come up, because there always is, so we will definitely work with them to try to control.
But it's not something we would write in. We can't say, you must water down, and or we can't.
Well, we've already approved the development agreement for phase 1,
Yeah.
so that one's kind of done.
Okay.
And we have approved the preliminary plat for the whole site, but you will get review of the development agreement for subsequent phases coming forward. So in phase 2 or phase 3, when that comes forward, at that point, if there are issues that came about on phase 1, that's the time to address them for the future phases. And we can look at crafting language in phase 2 and phase 3 that'll address some of the concerns and issues that the neighbors have and that the commission has.
So initially, it's some of the engineering department's policing, like you said, and then future we can be more proactive about it.
For phase 2 and phase 3, at one point, we can require them to come in from another direction if need be.
Okay, thanks.
Further discussion?
Just a quick question. Is this the total fill for the complete development, all 3 phases, or just the first phase?
First phase.
First phase.
So there's more to come
Oh, yeah.
in
Correct.
terms of number of truckloads beyond what we've discussed.
Correct.
After the 3,000.
And you've got about 3 of these coming at us.
Well, I know. This is significant, I think, from the resident's point of view. We ought to give this some serious thought before we just let it happen. Because
We've already approved
reversing
both.
it, once it's in play, reversing it's a lot more difficult than preventing it.
Well, we've already approved all three preliminary plats for all three
Well,
developments.
you're not going to have to change the plats, you just have to change the way they bring the materials in.
Well, again, we can look at it for subsequent phases, but the initial phases will all be coming through Wauwatosa Road on haul routes that the city will determine. That won't, at this point, that won't change.
Why not?
Because the agreements are already been approved, and one has been executed, and the second one is about to be executed.
I don't,
The Planning Commission and,
Based on incomplete information about the impact.
what's that?
The agreements were approved on the basis of incomplete information about the impact of this project.
Well, under any circumstance, there's going to be construction to build the subdivision. You know, the fill volume might not have been known at the time, but we knew that there would be construction there and material would have to be hauled to and from the site. So it's a nature of building anything. You're going to have to bring fill to the site to backfill trenches and to build roads and stuff like that. So it's, I mean, it goes along with the approval.
You know, all the subdivisions that were built previously to this have had these issues. They've all had fill, they've all had trucks working there. We haven't had a residential development this size in many years, so this is coming up sort of new to a lot of people.
I wouldn't have a problem if this were accessing the development as opposed to going through another subdivision to get there. That's my concern at this point. You're going through Knightsbridge to get into this development with all these trucks, which is not of their concern. It's not to their benefit. It's just a mode of access because of the DOT regulation. And I think we should look to that and what we can do to mitigate that.
Well, we're going to talk to the DOT, see if we can come
Correct.
straight in off the road across that grass stretch.
Yep. I will contact the DOT and initiate that discussion.
Okay.
Okay. Tonight, we're just approving the fill, though, so we're not really dealing with this topic per se, right?
Correct.
Now, the fill permit does include a haul route. So we're asking them to consider amending that haul route, if
Well,
it's
then
possible.
maybe-
If it's possible.
Maybe it's premature to approve it until we see that if there can be a modification to the haul route.
Well, they need to start working there. That's, you know,
But that doesn't deal with the problem. The fact that they're in a hurry doesn't deal with the problem.
Alderman
You know,
Adams.
the adjacent subdivision is not in a hurry to have this 3,000 truckload nuisance coming through.
Well, the way it stands now, we don't have a choice. That's the only road we can use to get onto that property.
Right.
I guess what we're asking is, let's talk to DOT again,
And to reiterate, we have talked to the DOT about using that access, and they've said no. So we will try again, is what we've agreed to do. You know, I would assume their answer will be the same thing, but we will contact them and ask.
Alderman Adams.
I find it unique to know that this haul thing is part of what we are approving tonight, but yet we're going to approve it and hope to amend it.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from. I would make an argument about safety, because that's what this all is about. This is a neighborhood, Knightsbridge. There's kids there, and there's teenage drivers going in and out, and have these big trucks. I mean, I would go along that line too, not just, these people don't want it. And how heavy is 10 cubic yards of dirt about?
If it's base course, it's about 20 tons of material that's on the truck.
So 20 tons, 3,000 times. I would just have a deal that, and it's that one stretch of road, right? Just that straight stretch before it gets to the houses?
Right.
I would just tell them that they're going to have to replace that road because it's already 19 years old.
Right. So.
And I don't care if you can see, I mean, yeah, I think you will see stress, but if you don't, you know it's there.
The way we typically administer that is we actually videotape the roadway pre-construction.
Okay.
So we have a pretty clear, and not to mention, we do our road ratings every year.
Yeah.
So we go out and we check every roadway and we give it a score of 1 to 10. But in addition, on that specific stretch of road, because it's a city-owned and maintained street, we'll videotape the roadway. And then once the construction's complete, it'll be after every single phase, we'll go back through, we'll revisit that same roadway and check it for deterioration.
Hopefully it's just the first phase if it even has to be the first phase. So, you know, We'll keep our antennas up now.
Commissioner Marchese?
So, again, I want to reinforce the intent of the majority of us to go back to the DOT and tell them, look, don't just look at this through this little silo. I mean, there's going to be a lot of construction for a lot of years. Maybe they need to be presented a little bigger picture on the overall impact, so that's one. Two, I want to, again, encourage staff as these next phases start rolling in, that you sit down with each of the developers, maybe with all of them, and say, can we come up with a construction plan or a plan that will be in the benefit of you folks that are trying to make money and the neighbors, and come up with an integrated plan that you could use Swan Boulevard, and then get everybody to agree to it up front. I mean, I understand you can't do anything now, and I understand that that's not a requirement, but I think in the spirit of helping our neighbors, if you could do that as these other phases roll in, I think that would be very helpful, I think, for the community and developers.
There's a subdivision going into the south, and there will be an access between these two subdivisions. I don't know when that'll be built, probably sometime next year.
That fill permit was approved last month, so I anticipate they'll be starting within the next month or so. So perhaps by phase two, that subdivision, the enclave, and this subdivision will both be under construction at the same time. But for future phases, there'll be interconnectivity where trucks won't have to use one access point. They'll be able to use multiple access points.
I think it's important to know that this first phase of at least Highlander Estates, the vast majority of this work will be done in the first 60 to 90 days. This isn't years. Yes, there may be new construction housing going on for years, but the roads will be in, the sewer will be in. This subdivision is slated to be ready to start pulling permits hopefully later this year. So I think, unfortunately, you kind of portrayed that this was going to be a 5 years of trucks rolling in and out. That's not going to be the case at all. Certainly, there will be second phases and third phases that will have another short period of time where they're developing the roads. But I don't want to paint the picture here that this is a 5-year headache for the neighbors. So.
Correct. I agree with that. I accept that. I did. There are going to be intense periods of construction, especially when you're putting in the infrastructure. Then after that, it's going to be building materials.
Right.
Is basically what's going to be coming in and out of there. But my point is to help the neighbors. If you could come up with an integrated plan that you could use, it would be better for everybody. I thank you for that comment.
Can you draw with your pointer where, like, how far down, kind of where this road is going from Wauwatosa through Knightsbridge, and then when it kind of goes down into the actual lot or land?
It's
about
roughly in
that
this
far?
area here is where it goes on to
But
the,
that will be the entrance eventually, right?
yes,
Isn't that?
correct.
So it goes,
I don't see the dot, Jack.
It's
it was there.
kind of fading a little bit there. It's,
Between, there's 4 houses on
four
that stretch.
lots
It's
down.
between, it's in the middle, between 2 on one side.
batteries are going.
The first phase is for the first 37 lots
Yeah,
of the subdivision.
yeah, the temporary road is between house 2 and 3, if you will.
Thanks.
Swan Road's not even shown on this. Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
6-2. Fill permit is approved. We move on now to regular business. First item is Rockwell Automation, building site plan amendment. The applicant is seeking building site plan amendment approval for a ground-mounted solar array at the Rockwell Automation Manufacturing Facility, 6400 West Enterprise Drive.
Let's jump forward.
Mayor, I believe there's someone here representing Rockwell. I was told.
Is the applicant here? You can sit at the table if you like. Jack?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a request for a solar array at Rockwell. I have the drawing on the screen up there that kind of shows the location of the array. Basically, there'll be 6 rows running east-west, facing south. At peak demand, it'll supply about 20% of the power for Rockwell. We have this as a building and site plan, yet we're still somewhat limited in terms of what we can approve or deny based on state statute. I did put some bullet points in there about what the state will limit in terms of how we can regulate alternative energy systems, and basically we have to, we're not allowed to decrease the efficiency or increase the cost of the system. It still has to preserve and protect the public health, and any condition would have to allow for an alternative system of comparable cost and efficiency. So we're somewhat limited to what we can review and approve for these types of alternative energy installations. As you can see by the location on the screen, it's roughly about 60 feet from Industrial Drive in our corporate park, and it's about 140 feet north of an existing driveway that enters the Rockwell facility. And my pointer's pretty much, I think, lost its batteries. These panels are roughly about 10 feet in height, and they have additional equipment associated with them, which will be located closer to the existing parking lot. The one issue that we do have with the location and the installation is the lack of additional landscaping proposed. Staff feels that there is an opportunity to put landscaping right along the Industrial Road property line and then kind of curve it along that driveway to somewhat screen the arrays from the public view. We understand from the applicant that we need trees that grow within that 8 to 10 foot range at maturity, so it does not decrease the efficiency of the system. And we did provide a number of alternatives that the city forester has recommended in terms of the species. So we do recommend approval of the solar array with the conditions, one which includes additional landscaping plan that is approved by staff that would include plantings along Industrial Road. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Give the applicant an opportunity. Mr. Gus, is that?
Gussie.
Gussie, I recognize your picture.
Mainly, here is a resource. So if you have any questions related to the project itself, but I think Jack and his folks with the city have done a really good job of working collaboratively to figure out within city ordinances what the best options are for the project.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Adams?
The idea fascinates me, and I'm just curious, is this being done by the company just for energy savings, or is it being done to inspire others, or is it a business you're in, this type of thing, as an example?
Well, Rockwell Automation does a number of different electronic and power equipment development. There's some things I can't speak to with what they like to do with the array. A majority of the driving measures were economic savings, and also to learn about the technology applications that it can have in the Midwest. They are partnered with the manufacture of solar modules that they're doing in Wisconsin, out in California, for the larger, the new Google campus that's going in. They have a big manufacturing plant in Monterey, California, and part of this is a both educational and marketing endeavor for the two companies. But most of the driving factor for it was utility savings for the manufacturing facility that's on the property.
Well, I know I, for one, and I'm sure many of us are grateful that you're in our community and you're a great part of it. I just have to take that chance to say, and I think that, you know, I will obviously approve this, so.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Now, this is subject to the landscape requirement being
Your
met?
motion includes staff recommendations? Yes. Okay. That's in staff recommendation. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that item is adopted. Good luck, Mr. Gussie.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Move on to item 8, Novation Group Consulting for River Barn Park. The applicant is seeking building site plan amendment approval for a cell tower at River Barn Park. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name's Graham Packer. I'm with Novation Consulting Group, representing SBA Wireless, seeking to build a new cellular communication tower in River Barn Park. Alex Novak, who's been working on this, was supposed to be here tonight. Unfortunately, he's stuck in South Dakota, so my background on this is not the greatest. But I do know that the negotiations have been going on between Alex and the city, and the lease terms are pretty well agreed to, as far as I know. There is some concern about a fall zone with the tower. I just received today a letter from the tower manufacturing company that addresses if there was a catastrophic failure of the tower, how far the top section of the tower would bend, and that's 60 feet. May I give you one of these? I made a few copies.
Yeah.
Jack, is there a picture of the tower?
Yes, I can kind of get to that in a second. I guess I'll just kind of fill you in a little bit on the background. This is a request for a cell tower at River Barn Park. It's roughly 120 feet in height. It's being proposed to be located on the south portion of the River Barn parking lot. I have the site plan up in front of you. You can see the bolded line. That is the location of the tower and the equipment enclosure. It is adjacent right to the actual parking lot, so there'll be no additional driveway to get to the actual enclosure. As the applicant said, the city attorney and our assistant city administrator has been working on lease agreements regarding the cell tower. They did ask that the condition be added that common council approval of the final lease agreement be added as a condition. I did sketch on the map that's in front of you up on the screen, roughly the location to the property line to the south. It's roughly 60 feet at the corner and then 90 feet on an angle to the actual tower itself. The park board did look at this issue in October of 2014. I have the minutes for that meeting up on the dais. This was basically their preferred location in the park. They did not want any additional disturbance to the park further away from the parking lot. We're also limited by the amount of floodway within the park where the structure cannot go. So this was basically the agreed upon location that the park board felt would be less obtrusive to the park facility. They also requested that we look and work with the applicant on the design of the enclosure, which we have, and we've basically come up with a plan that shows, and I'll get to that in a second, it shows basically a fieldstone look of the building, almost look like a barn foundation kind of thing. The gates on the actual enclosure will be painted to match the color of the existing pavilion at River Barn. And then it's going to be softened a little bit with some arborvitae surrounding the structure as well. Again, in terms of the tower, I can get to the picture of it. It's a 120-foot monopole. It's pretty much typical of most of the cell towers that are located at Mequon. I did also put some notes in the report. Here's a picture of what the monopole would look like, and there's additional room on there for additional carriers in the future if that happens to be a demand. I also put some language in there that, and we did talk about this, I think, last year regarding changes to state law, which limit property owner or the city from enforcing regulations on a potential cell tower location. I think the biggest one it mirrors the federal requirements that you cannot look at health issues when approving or denying a cell tower. The state has also added conditions that you can't take aesthetic concerns into effect when you approve or deny. And related to the fall zone that the applicant was speaking of, you can't place a fall zone requirement on a tower unless you have fall zone requirements for all your other structures, buildings in the city, which we do not have for other commercial buildings. So we're severely limited in terms of what we can regulate with this tower. I mean, ultimately, the Common Council has the authority to approve the lease, so if they don't want it in the park, the council still has that option to approve or deny the lease. But as the Planning Commission approving the building and site plan, we're severely limited in what we can and cannot regulate with regard to this application. I'll open up to any questions from the commission.
Are you familiar with the cell tower that is at the River Point Village Shopping Center, which is at the intersection of Port Washington Road and Brown Deer Road?
Yes.
That white cylinder
Correct.
with no contraptions on the outside? That cell tower might be unique in southeastern Wisconsin, if not the world. It doesn't look like a cell tower. It looks like a plain white cylinder. It's a remarkable design. And I understand that, I guess it's is it the state of Wisconsin or the federal government which has interfered and said that we cannot impose aesthetic standards?
That's the state. The federal government, through the 1996 Telecommunication Act, is where they limited the impact of health effects on locations of towers. But the state, in 2013, basically stated you cannot take aesthetics into consideration. Prior to 2013, we were approving new towers as a conditional use grant where we could, look at impacts to surrounding properties as a part of that process. Our city attorney basically states that we no longer have that option based on the requirements of the statute.
Well, I can tell you, as having been a longtime resident of Fox Point and actually having been involved in cell tower decision processes, that solution in Fox Point is remarkable, and in my personal opinion, ought to be a standard for any municipality that wants to have a cell tower built.
Yeah, and the only thing I'm not sure about that is that if it's a single carrier tower or not, and if it does allow for additional carriers.
May I say something on that?
Sure.
I agree with you, they look a lot better. I just did a one-year project in Las Vegas, and they're all over the place. And the problem is with the new technology, you have these, what they call remote radio heads, and they will not fit into those cylinders. So what's happening is that actually demolishing a lot of these towers and going back to this style of tower. So, technology seems like great improvements, so sometimes it just doesn't work.
Well, I'll concede this is not the worst looking design I've seen. But many years ago, at the outset of cell towers, I coined the term techno-eyesore.
I was responsible for zoning one in Michigan about 20 years ago on Telegraph Avenue, and it was one of the first trees. And everybody refers to it as the toilet brush today. That's how poorly designed it was.
Okay, we have one person who has registered to speak on this. I'm going to call on him, James Angreson. Angreson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jim Angrisano. I moved here a year ago, retired, and lived near my grandson. First, I've educated myself since getting that notice 5 days ago. I want to thank Jack and Jack. What is Jack, my alderman's last name?
Oh, John Lashinsky.
John Lashinsky, excuse me. Okay. And they've educated me, and I realize what we can and can't talk about. And I know wherever the tower is built, somebody is going to be adversely affected. Could you please go back to the plot?
I can get back to the ortho photo. That kind of shows your.
If you look at this, the 60 and 90, that's my property. From the tower, as best I could measure, it's about, from the top of I'm about 130 feet, I think, to my corner of my house. Be on there?
Yep, you're on. Let me just zoom in a little bit for you. There you go. So you're. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm just south of the park. And I'm here to respectfully request you consider another side. I have looked over and over and walked around it, and the only other side I know there's the floodplain would be about 150 feet northeast of the barn. I know everybody is going to be affected, but I'll be affected by this by far the most. I spent the weekend looking at property value articles, of which there's many pages. I've got 10 here, which I won't certainly insult you by reading. But I did find that two very interesting pieces of information. According to a survey by the National Association of Realtors, 94% of people wouldn't look at a house if it were close to a cell tower. In terms of estimates on property value, they range from 2 to 40%, and as you know, it depends on the situation. But the one relevant point everyone agrees on, the closer you are to the tower, the more you will be adversely affected. In fact, when I mentioned to Jack, who was I really appreciate his time, about the parcel, what do you call the assessor's plot, is that what you call it? Yeah, and I
Yes.
just said, well, can we move it down that way? That would help my neighbors, and it's still near my property, but at least it's not in my face, et cetera. And he said, well, the person there wants to develop it. He doesn't want it there, and we all know why, because it will lower the value of those properties. Just a personal note, I've put in, since I moved here, about $50,000 into this house. So reading these articles doesn't leave one with a good feeling. I know the gentleman here will make probably a very convincing argument about the falling down. We were talking about that in my steps. But a little bird about fires, I know that there's a low probability there's going to fall, there's a low probability there's a fire. But if it does, it'll land right in the trees, and then my house will go up like a tinderbox. There's also a very low probability, I don't know if you can build these things on a concrete slab? Can you raise them up?
Yes.
When you build it? Because I'm thinking, what's the probability of a flood, given the history here, being high enough to hurt your equipment? I'm just raising that point. That might be a low probability too, like my fire, but we've taken that into consideration.
Yeah, they'll.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No,
You're the expert, I'm just asking.
Far from an expert, but they do take all that into consideration. I mean, when they survey the property and they.
How high does the water have to be before there's damage?
I don't know. In this case, I don't.
Equipment, I asked my steps.
They're not going to build a slab this high off the ground.
Okay, and so I have a technical question about co-location, I was reading the Wisconsin law, which isn't a nice thing to read if you don't want to be depressed, but it says in your application, you're supposed to, correct me if I'm wrong, provide a sworn statement regarding you did an evaluation of co-location within your search ring. Was that done? I think that's according to the law.
No, it wasn't done. Well, it basically states that there's a sworn statement that they feel that and I can find the actual language. It basically has no teeth. It's
I'm sorry, what has
we're basically at the mercy of the applicant. It states, and let me just find the actual language.
May I just say something there? What happens when like Verizon Wireless would be the first carrier on this tower? They give us a search map with a latitude and longitude on there, and they say, we need something within this radius to make this tower work. But if you can find co-locations, then we'll definitely look at them. Well, from my point of view, and from Alex's point of view, if we find a co-location that they can go on and it works, we get paid the same as going through all this and going through the zoning hearings and everything. So be assured that when we look, the first thing we look at are co-locations, because it makes our life much easier. I can't speak for Alex because he's not here. I don't know which ones he looked at, but I'm sure he did.
I just asking if that was done, that's all.
No, and again, there's two reasons why it wasn't done. Number one, the city is the owner of the parcel and is negotiating a lease, and speaking with our attorney, it felt it probably wasn't necessary. And if you look at the language, it says, if the applicant is to construct a new tower, an explanation as to why the applicant chose the proposed location and why the applicant did not choose co-location, including a sworn statement attesting to one of the following regarding co-location within the area in which the applicant needs to site the new facilities. And one of the bullet points is co-location is economically burdensome to the mobile service provider. And they just have to have a sworn statement that says that. And there's nothing we can do to determine whether that's actually accurate or not. So, and there's other ones that it's technically infeasible, would not result in the same mobile service functionality, coverage, and capacity. Again, we don't have any way to refute their evidence. So basically, all they have to do is provide a sworn statement that says that that's the case, and we have to accept it. So it's somewhat of a process that has no teeth to it. And then that was the other reason. One, that we are the owners of the property, and two, because we felt that this really did not provide anything other than just a process with no bite to it, so.
Okay.
Well, that was, I, again, respectfully request, consider another option within here. I don't want to put it in somebody else's property, but if you did, it would still be closest to my ideal would be, I guess it would be on the corner, it would be exactly almost as close as at the far end of my property, and it would be close to the assessor's plat. That certainly would be better for all my neighbors. And there are no houses there. I think that property's been for sale for, what, 10 or 12 years, so.
And we did look at that location. I had discussions with the Parks Director, and the Park Board did look at that location. Their concern was they did not want another access road through the park to get anywhere further east on the site, and they wanted it as close to the parking lot as possible. So, and as I stated to, they did not want an access road in the park further disturbing the park itself, and they did not want that potential issue of having to maintain that road or making sure that the carrier maintained that road.
Once it's built, what do you need to, how often would they, how often would you, once it's built, you're all done building it now, how often is something
It depends how many carriers you have. Generally, after the first year or so, probably once or twice a month, to make sure nobody's throwing trash over there and make sure.
going in, like a car or a van or something?
Pickup truck. Pickup truck.
That's all we could do. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Marlene Sobczak.
I am Marlene Sobczak, and I'm here because I also oppose the placement of the cell tower in River Barn Park. For me, two primary issues. One, a philosophical notion. A park is a place to access nature and enjoy nature, and a place for kids to play and recreate. And clearly, a cell tower is not, does not enhance or contribute to those goals or to that mission. And secondly, I think there is a safety consideration. And no, I am not talking about causing cancer or any of the things that the federal government says we can't talk about, but rather, you've heard the expression, build it and they will come. Well, I kind of feel that if you build the tower, build it, they will come and they will climb. I have concern about kids. This is a park that's actively used by kids, and I just worry that they're going to try to play around it, climb it. I did see on the plan, there's a 7-foot wall surrounding it, which sounds good, unless you're a 6-foot male 16-year-old, that might not be a very big obstacle. So I just don't think a cell phone tower is compatible with a park. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more, Deborah Scott.
Hi, good evening. We are currently, I'm Debbie Scott. We are currently building on Willow Road, and that's right across from the park there. One of the considerations that I would like to ask the gentleman here who is proposing this is, you can do a search for current cell towers within a certain radius of any one address. And so I did that. There are 19 cell towers. I'm not even talking antennas. There are 106 antennas in a 3-mile radius of my address on Willow Road, which is one house from Green Bay Road. And there are 19 cell towers within a 3-mile radius of my house. So why isn't that sufficient to serve the wireless industry in this area? 19 cell towers seems like a lot. What do we need another one for?
He was at the cutting edge back in the early 90s. And when he said to me, hold on, you and 911 with cell phones, police were located on 50 vehicles. He said to me that he thinks one of the reasons they may be putting it there, besides the reason other customers can serve. As I described the topography, et cetera, it's the highway.
So I only had 3 copies I distributed to the Planning Commission. It shows the locations of the cell towers. The 4 that are registered are noted there at the bottom. And I don't have the whole list, but you can go to the website and get those. The ones that aren't registered are also listed, along with the corporations. And you have the distances from my address, which is 4651 West Willow Road. Some of them are half a mile, some of them are a mile, some of them are 2.5 miles. So I guess my proposition here is, can we prove that this particular cell tower is necessary in the area? If there are already 19 cell towers in a 3-mile radius of the park, why are we adding another one? Thank you.
It's because the state government doesn't give us any authority to approve or disapprove. We can't say no to anyone who wants to build a cell tower. We simply can't say no to them.
Just to quickly address that, though, I mean, an ideal way of doing towers, if it worked, would be to put one 200-foot or 300-foot tower up, and everybody goes on it and cover a huge distance. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way with the radio frequency. And generally, when they have a specific spot like this, they have what's called a coverage hole, which causes drop calls and a lack of 4G coverage that can't be covered from further out. They need to be in a very specific spot to cover that area. And it's usually driven by consumers in those areas complaining. So it's going further out. Half a mile's huge with this, as far as the coverage is concerned. If you go half a mile away, you probably, it's not going to cover it.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Thank you. Sorry to this is really annoying to me, too.
I have to recap what we can and can't do. So, the federal government says we cannot talk about health concerns. Talk about that. The state government says we cannot talk about aesthetics. And what are we here for? What is this in front of us for? What can we or can't? I mean, we should all have such strong lobbyists as the cell industry, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
What can we
It really,
talk about?
I mean, we can look at the enclosure, things like that. It's also a way to get it out to the public that people are knowing that, the last thing I think we want is a cell tower being built, but people not knowing was even up for debate, so.
So is the process really that the company comes forward, and I'm sorry, no, I'm getting a little ruffled here, and it's not, no offense to you. So the company comes forward and says, we need a cell tower in your city, in this radius, figure out where we can put it, and then they pay.
Well, they approached the city, and I think, and this went to the park board, I think it also went to public welfare, and I think the city's perspective was that it's going to go somewhere in this area. Why not have it, out in the park where we can control it, regulate it, and then have a lease agreement with them. But if it doesn't go here, they could go right across the street, and then we have other circumstances that haven't played out yet. But there's been a carrier that's talked to 2 neighbors and said, I'd like to put it in your yard. If you don't, I'll put it in your neighbor's yard. And, whoever wants the money can have it, basically, is what it's down to. I mean, there really is very little we can do at this point to regulate them, if
As the
they're
mayor
under
said,
200 feet in height.
They come to the city, and there's no saying no.
Pretty much.
Well, the city could say no to putting it in the park.
Correct.
Right, but you can't say no
To
tower.
putting it across, yeah. They could put it on somebody's property who's willing to have it, and they can have it there. We can't say no.
So we can discuss more I don't even know what to call it,
I mean, you could make minor placement corrections, things like that, but there is even a requirement that says you cannot disapprove an application based on an assessment by the political subdivision of the suitability of other locations for conducting the activity. So, I mean, again, and there's a whole bullet, there's 20 bullets here that what you can't do, and I didn't go through them all, but it does limit our ability. And I did tell the neighbor, and I had a conversation with the alderman of the district. I mean, this is something they could discuss when the lease agreement gets to common council, if they want to discuss the applicability of the location and whether the city wants to, enter into this lease agreement. But the planning commission's role here is just to review the application and make a recommendation.
If I understand, I speak, oh,
On this one, I mean, I've been through it through the years for the city too, and we had more to say. The one near Ferrante's in the back, that mayor wanted it to be more of a structure than a pole. And I believe we have one towards Wazaki Road off of Mequon that's kind of near the trees and looks like a tree. And I know that there's one by a church, I believe that's a Riverland, that looks like a flagpole. So we have done those things, but we can't now. That's what I'm being told. And some of them look kind of goofy, like the one in Nick Grill, Jamaica, that looks like the tallest palm tree you've ever seen in your life. But I don't know if we should talk a little bit about the fact that I know the park board preferred this spot. If there is a spot 150 feet away, a little further away from your the gentleman's house, and that's a slight thing, I think that's something we could talk about. And I also, I hope we're still getting money in reserve that if these cell towers get abandoned, we're not stuck with the cost of taking them down, Jack. I know we've done that in the
There's
past.
another condition about the bonds and what you can and can't do regarding that. Now, as the owner of the property, I think the city can negotiate its lease terms to get, you know, the safety net they prefer, but if it was a third party, there'd be limited amount we could do in terms of.
Because I know, I think we need to be consistent, and we've done it on the past ones, that if, for any abandonment or new technology, that we have a bit of money to get it down if they walk away. Okay, so,
And again, this was a chicken and egg kind of a thing too. I didn't want this to get approved by the common council's full lease agreement, and then definitely you would say, why are we here? So I wanted to have this in front of the commission so that if there are concerns, that the commission will know about them from the commission prior to final
Well,
action on that lease agreement.
you know, I don't want to trump the park board in any way, but, you know, I'm very concerned about what residents, and this is very close to this gentleman's house, and if we could push it back a little bit, at least be closer to his backyard or the other yard, I think that would be a reasonable thing, because I would think that that service road doesn't have to be built like for a fire truck, or does it?
No, it
Can't
wouldn't have
just
to
be
be
a
that
little
wide.
gravel road with a little grass strip in the middle? I mean, if they only go to it once or twice a month?
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be that wide, but it's if you're going to go east, you're going to have to go pretty far east to get around the baseball field that's there. And there's
Oh,
also a
that's not
stormwater
showing.
drainage discharge that we have to watch out for as well. So there's a couple things there.
Well, the baseball, if you stayed towards the property line and just moved east, but that's wet area?
Well, you got the trees that are existing there, and I don't think we'd want to touch those. And then to the north of the trees, there's that little white spot you kind of see in the middle there. That's a outfall of a stormwater pipe that kind of runs across Cedarburg Road. So we have to kind of avoid that. And then you can kind of see the ring around the baseball field. That's actually a grade difference that kind of delineates the field, which we have to stay away from. And then as you go further east, then you start running into the soccer field. So there could be a potential location there, but the park board just, they did not prefer having it that far east of the road and having an access road in there. So, I mean, ultimately it is up to the common
Well,
council.
what is the absolute closest spot then from everything you said? If it was shifted, from everything you just said, what would be the closest spot for the shortest road?
Without my pointer working, I would say if you went to his property line on the back and then shifted over maybe on a northeast angle, it could potentially kind of go right past that little tree line there. But that's still going to be we'll have to figure out, you know, it can be done, but we'll have to take in consideration that the stormwater, that pipe that runs through there.
Can you show us a picture of the total park?
The park
In the
itself?
handout, there's a diagram that shows,
Yeah, I
think,
can
the
zoom
entire
out a little
park.
bit here if you want. It's just zoomed in right here. And the other areas we kind of did talk about were on the north portion of the park, but with Cedarburg Road being, again, under the jurisdiction of the state, there's access issues, and we did not want a long frontage road in that location. And there's also, again, it doesn't show up on here, but there is a substantial amount of floodway along the river, and it encroaches pretty far into the park area as well.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted an answer to. Appreciate it.
What about adjacent to the northern parking lot?
To the north of the furthest parking lot?
The northernmost parking lot.
North of the circle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's some soccer fields that are pretty close by there, but that could be a potential location. Again, I wasn't at the park board meeting. They are the ones that were kind of pushing for this direction. I guess it could fit there. There is some fields, but there is enough buffer there between the fields.
Jack, did the residents voice their opposition to the park board as well as to us?
There was no public meeting notice for the
So
park
the park
board.
board made their decision without knowing the objections that now.
Well, this was at the beginning stages. This was more basically an advisory decision by the park board to see if we even want to enter in this lease agreement. Were they open to it? And if they were, where would they want to see? That was basically to give the Public Welfare Committee and the Common Council direction if they even are interested in putting it in the park itself.
Well, to Alderman Adams' point, now that we've got some new facts to weigh on here, maybe the park board would be amenable to a little different position, knowing that there's some other issues that they didn't have before.
I agree with Alderman and with Plan Commissioner Fox that the adverse impact of this on property values of the neighbors of the park is an important consideration. And though I might be sympathetic with the preferences of the park board, the bottom line is that, you know, we should do the minimum to diminish the property values of adjacent residents. And should pick the location based on that, not on the preferences of the park board.
Well, again, I guess I think the Common Council could make that decision, but my concern is if you cannot do this based on aesthetic concerns.
I'm not talking about aesthetics.
Or health concerns, what is driving the depreciation in value?
This is our private property.
People don't like to live next to it.
I know,
Most
but
people
why?
don't like to
It's the
live next
aesthetic,
to a
it's the
tower.
health, it's those issues, and you're somewhat considering them as part of the decision to move it, so.
Jack, this is our property, it's our lease.
Correct. Yes, I think the Common Council
So if it's a tiny shove on the
has,
property and they're willing to work with us, we can have this
yes,
discussion.
at the Common Council,
And
sure.
not at planning commission?
No, I don't believe that's really the role of the commission.
What do you think, Dan?
Let the park board come back.
Well, you're asking for building and site plan,
I think we deny it.
yeah, building and site plan amendment for the park. So if we approve this specific location, then we approve this specific location. If we want them to consider something 100 feet away or 200 feet away, we're going to have to say that.
I think you could make a recommendation that the Common Council take into consider other locations in the park when negotiating the lease terms with the carrier as part of your approval.
Okay, and the lease terms are coming up in August?
I'm not sure where that process is. That's the attorney and the assistant city administrator have been working on that.
Okay. Well, then we could also, in the meantime, send it back to the park board to affirm or change their opinion of where it should go.
I can have the Parks Director have the item back on the Parks Board.
No vacation.
Can I make a motion?
You have one?
Yes.
Okay.
I move to deny the request and refer the matter to the park board for trying to find a site which is more distant from adjacent residential property owners.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I'm tempted not to vote for it. I'd rather table it. I don't want to show such a negative. I think it's something we can work through on the site. I don't want to send a message to you that we are not willing to do this. And to me, a denial is a denial. So I'm not going to vote for the deny, but I will make a motion to table this and come back at the next meeting after the park board, because I don't want to slow this down for you either. Is that okay? Are you on a time frame? I mean,
I don't know this site well enough. To be
okay.
honest.
So I'm going to vote against the denial because it's there. And if it doesn't go through, I'll vote to table it.
I think what we really ought to do is approve it, subject to park board revisiting the location and the Common Council visiting the specific location when it does the lease agreement.
Well,
So
that's a
that way
good
we'll
idea.
have that opportunity to discuss the location further, but we can allow them to continue to proceed because we can't deny a cell tower anyway, so.
And I would also, there is a concern with tabling. We also have to act within a certain amount of time. It's also in the state statute. And if we don't act within that certain amount of time, it's deemed approved.
Well, I respect what our mayor says on this. I'm glad you
I
checked
agree
it.
with him, yes.
Okay. You
Jack.
want to vote on your motion?
Yeah, that or withdraw.
Was there a
it.
second?
No, withdraw it.
Was this motion
I'll withdraw
Yeah.
this motion.
I'll withdraw the second. Just,
withdrew a second?
And can you kindly repeat the proposed fine-tuning of the motion? Dan?
Move approval, subject to staff recommendations, also that the specific location of the tower in the park will be referred back to the park board, and it will be reviewed also by the Common Council as part of lease negotiations.
Can we
So
also,
it could change, or it could stay the same.
and can
But
we
we have
also,
that option as the landowner.
and can we also add in that the residents be notified nearby? Because that didn't happen at the last park board. It didn't legally have to, but as a courtesy, could we tell the residents when they're revisiting it?
Sure, I mean, we have the cards of the
So we don't have to
the
make it
individuals
part
here
of the
today, and we could
Okay.
notify them when the meeting is.
Okay. You want to, someone
I'll
wants-
second the mayor's proposal.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other ideas or discussion?
Just to clarify, River Barn Park is the site-specific location, is the main point for further review.
Yes.
Location of the tower. And that's
By
what
both
we're
the park
approving
board
if
and
we
the
go-
Common Council.
Right.
So if there's a better location, we will find it. We hope.
A less impactful to property value. Okay.
We can only hope.
So Jack, on the notification to neighbors, does it just go out to those people who have raised a concern tonight, or would it go out to everybody within a certain radius of the proposed tower?
I would not just send it to the neighbors, because I think if we do look at moving it to the north, and I think one of the neighbors was standing up here, I think there might be a concern on her part of having it moved further to the north. So I would probably send notice out to anybody that's in that vicinity.
Thank you.
Just in case that location does get modified a little bit, and then they become the ones that are directly affected by it.
Do you happen to know the time frame in which we have to make an approval or denial?
45 to 90 days
From the
the
time
date of
of-
application.
And what's the clock ticking on right now? How many days are we into it?
I don't have the application, it's downstairs, but my guess is they've had at least 30 days in already, so.
Okay.
Well, we got the approval, so that's part of it.
Yes, that's why once you make the approval, that's fine. That's why the commission itself is not in danger of any violation. The Common Council is not in any of these conditions, because again, we're the owner of the property and we're in a lease agreement negotiations. So this is not specific to that statute.
All right. No further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 8-0. We're making progress.
Thank you. It was a good discussion. Thank you.
You're welcome. We move on to item number 9, Richmond Investment Group. Rezoning recommendation. The applicant is requesting a rezoning recommendation from R3 to B3 office for the parcel west of 7606 West Mequon Road.
but it was a conceptual, I think.
Good evening.
Okay, I think I asked Jack to put it up here too.
Kim?
Good evening, Commissioners. The applicant is seeking a rezoning recommendation
as it relates to an office development proposal on Mequon Road. This is immediately west of the Warzella's shopping center. It's located at 7606 West Mequon Road. The parcel is currently vacant and is currently zoned single-family residential. The proposal is to construct a one-story, 5,000 square foot office development with Richmond Investment Advisors as the principal user. It's my understanding that there's a potential for probably 2 other tenant spaces, but those spaces would be related to financial and office service type work. The applicants came before the Planning Commission in June for a consultation, and there was some discussion at the time, as well as the sharing of 3 different site options. Planning Commission also heard some public testimony from the neighborhood. In terms of rezoning the property, it is subject, of course, to Common Council approval. A conditional use grant as well as a building and site plan application would be required. So if the applicants are successful at the Common Council level, the Commission would see them back here for the conditional use grant and building and site plan approvals. Those would, of course, come at a later date. In terms of input that we received from the neighborhood at the time of the consultation, there was some concern expressed regarding traffic flow and some of that entrance, traffic entering into the neighborhood northbound on Solar Avenue, as well as just the general encroachment or extension of commercial uses beyond the intersection as we know the commercial uses stand today. We, of course, take a look at a certain set of findings when making recommendations and doing our analysis on zoning and land use changes. That helps us remain consistent in our analysis. And those findings are highlighted in the staff report. One of the things we take a look at are the land use designations in the area, as well as the zoning and the actual existing uses. So the mix of uses in the neighborhood certainly reflect the mix of zoning and the mix of land use classifications in the area. That's everything from town center zoning, neighborhood commercial zoning, plex residential, and then of course single family as you get further and further out from the intersection. The intersection, of course, is Wauwatosa and Mequon Road, 2 state highways. And some of the uses in the area include a restaurant, personal and professional services, a gas station, some small-scale retail, and a grocery store. So from staff's perspective, when we look at whether the rezoning to B3, which is an office zoning district, and the proposed use, we would suggest that the low-intensity office development could be considered compatible with that surrounding area. The second finding, we take a look at reasonable uses under the current zoning district. The R3 zoning district would allow for a new single-family home. It would also allow, under a conditional use grant, some commercial-type uses, including a daycare facility, religious institution, and as most of you know from a couple recent projects we've had over the past year or so, 8-bed CBRFs are permitted in single-family residential zoning districts, and much like the cell towers, we're limited by state statutes on what your review and motions can be towards those types of uses. The location on Mequon Road and the immediate adjacency to the existing commercial uses and to the uses to the south of that intersection, or the south side of Mequon Road within that intersection, probably make that location a little bit more challenging to appeal to the private market for a single-family home. There's probably, in terms of concern about the traffic, ingress and egress out of this particular site, as we mentioned at the time of the consultation, the applicant has indicated an interest in providing a cross or looking to achieve a cross access with the existing commercial use to the east. If and when traffic volumes rise to the level that WISDOT might suggest they are, although we've debated the intensity of those traffic volumes, it's likely that we would see a consolidation then of a curb cut on Mequon Road that's servicing both of those commercial properties on the north. Right now there's a curb cut, oh, okay, thank you. A median opening here, as well as, oh, I lost my laser. I think the batteries are going. Okay. Well, also the closing of the median at Solar. So from our perspective, it's unlikely that someone would exit these commercial properties, head westbound, then north through Solar to circle back to Wauwatosa. Likely what's going to happen is they're going to make the cross connection through the Warzella site and then use the curb cut that's out on Wauwatosa Road, which is north of, across the street, I guess, from Outpost and north of the intersection. Of course, going to that signalized intersection is much more convenient to someone traveling, a motorist traveling, than to try and circle through the neighborhood. Of course, if you live in that neighborhood, you'll probably use that route. The other finding we look at is, has there been a change in character or trend in development in the area where the proposal is requested? There have been several changes to this area in recent years. Town center zoning was established in 2007. That applies mostly to properties to the east of the intersection. There's been two recent Plex residential developments in terms of Heron Pond and the Maida proposal, which is Legends Court condos, which is being constructed right now. The city also proactively rezoned 380 acres to the south of this area for single-family residential development at 1 acre densities, and we're right now in the process of a city-led public sewer infrastructure project to serve that 380 acres. The Planning Commission also commented on the options presented by the applicant in terms of site plan. There was general consensus among the staff, I think the applicant, as well as the planning commissioners, what had been referred to as site option C. We did include that in your packet just as a reminder, but it does push the building, the parking lot, access to the east of the subject parcel, which creates a pretty substantial green space buffer to the single-family residential neighborhood to the west and to the north. I think it's about, it creates a separation of about 85 feet, and it does achieve an open space requirement of 73%. As I mentioned, Planning Commission would have the opportunity to review that building and site plan if the rezoning is successful. So in general, staff can support this rezoning recommendation. A couple other things to point out. Of course, it's conditioned upon council's action, but we did also make the suggestion that the rezoning would not take effect until Planning Commission would approve this specific use under that conditional use grant and building and site plan review. The reason why the conditional use grant is required in this particular application is because the lot size is below the minimum required per the zoning district. We do have an allowance or flexibility in the zoning code that when the lot size is substandard to the zoning district, people can still come forward with a proposal for those types of uses, but it does require a conditional use grant. What that means for the city, and hopefully gives some comfort to the neighborhood, that if there are changes proposed in the future after the initial construction, if there's a suggestion of expansion or modification, all of those are required to go through a conditional use grant amendment, and there is public notification of those changes as well. So that provides a little bit of additional protection or management or oversight by the city in the future as well.
Thank you, Kim. Just a question for you. I know a lot of people have expressed concern that once you start expanding commercial development in a direction that it continues to grow. It would continue to grow west on Mequon Road. What's staff's opinion of the likelihood of that ever happening?
Well, there's a lot of things that we can talk about as it relates to land use. I would suggest that currently right now, the distinction between the commercial and residential is more of an arbitrary line than what a planning department or a city, had they looked at this initially, would have indicated. Likely normally you would have chosen Solar Avenue as that break between commercial and residential, and that's really not atypical to other intersections that we have in the city, nor is it atypical to some of the recent changes we've made in and around intersections. And I can point to a couple examples. One is in this immediate area. When you look at the intersection of Mequon and Wauwatosa Road, Road, a few years back, I think it was 2007, 2008, we rezoned the parcel immediately south of the BP gas station to allow for commercial zoning and a small-scale service and retail use. I would suggest to the commission that the expansion of Quick Trip was a similar example in which you expanded commercial zoning to the south and transitioned to a single-family residential neighborhood. Another example would be the area on Port Washington Road, north of Mequon Road and across, I know I'm throwing out a lot of directions, but across from Venture Court. Across from Pick and Save, we had 4 individual parcels that remained non-commercial zoning because there were existing single-family homes on it. So I think in circumstances like this, we've probably, maybe benefited isn't the right word, but I think we've somewhat benefited by not making these changes because there were existing land uses that kept those properties as residential, and it wasn't until the property owner had a specific interest did the private, commercial market, give more attention to it and demand a different land use.
Okay, thank you. We have some people that wish to speak to this issue. We'll do that now. Mr. Don Summer wishes to speak. Don?
This one? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Don Summer from Summers Automotive, 7211 West Mequon Road. I just want to share a couple brief comments this evening. I think most of you know, or if you don't know, I've lived and worked in the community my entire life, and know both John and Matt Richmond personally and professionally. They are our neighbors immediately to the east of our dealership. They're both stellar individuals. They're both heavily involved in our community in multiple groups, activities, and interests with the greater good of our community in mind. I know John Mickelson, the builder selected for this project, personally and professionally. He too builds very high-end quality buildings. The project that these individuals are looking to build, I think, is a great project for that corner of Mequon and Wauwatosa Road, and I think it'll greatly enhance that corner of that intersection. Based on the narrative, it looks like they are going to, or they plan to occupy 60% of the building. I just want to reiterate that as an owner-occupied business owner ourselves. You're there every day. You're making sure everything is the way it should be as far as the looks, facility, and everything else. The business appears to be a very low-impact business. It's open, again, according to the narrative, from 8 to 5. I feel that this is a perfect building and project for that corner, and based on our current history as neighbors, I think they would be ideal for that corner for this project, and I would personally vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summer. Leo and Dolores St. Ange are opposed but do not wish to speak. Alice Kelch is basically opposed and does not wish to speak. Tina Schwantes supports this project and wishes to speak.
Can you read addresses too? Because,
Good evening. I'm Tina Schwantes, the Executive Director of the Mequon-Thiensville Chamber of Commerce, addresses 6331 West Mequon Road. I'm here to express support for Richmond Investment Services and the request for the zoning change to allow their building project. The Chamber is in support of thoughtful economic development, and this requested zoning change is in an area where there are already commercial buildings in a main corridor. And the business wanting to invest in our community, Richmond Investment Services, is an established Mequon business that has proven to be extremely community-minded and has contributed in many ways to continually enhance our community. As individuals and as business owners, they are always respectful and considerate, and I know these traits will come through when working on the project or relating to the neighbors. For these reasons, I urge you to grant the zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwantes. John Moore supports the project, does not wish to speak. Lives a couple houses down on Mequon Road, a little bit to the west. Okay, Jane Miller, Concord Creek, supports the project and wishes to speak. And you're not Jane.
Hi, my name's Jake Miller.
Jay.
Yeah. I go by my middle name, so that's why it's there. I live over in Concord Creek, and I'd briefly like to speak and show my support for the building and of John and Matt Richmond. I think that furthering our small businesses in this community, we have to support that, and I think that's really important. So I'm here to, I think it's a good decision, and I'd like to see it get built. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Kathleen Schilling from Zaki County Economic Development supports and wishes to speak.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Katie Schilling. I'm the Executive Director of Ozaki Economic Development. Ozaki Economic Development, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit that works with businesses looking to expand or locate in Ozaki County. As such, we're happy to support the Richmond project rezoning. The Richmond Investment Group is a vibrant, quality family business, one of the businesses that we like to see continue to grow within our community. Both Matt and his father, John, are strong supporters, volunteering with the Mequon-Thiensville School District, Gathering on the Green, as well as a variety of other community groups. And lastly, we see this project, which is a high-quality office building with low traffic volume, as a great buffer between the residential neighborhood and the retail businesses to the east. As such, we support this project and hope the Plan Commission will support the rezoning as well.
Thank you, Ms. Schilling. Harry Sutton on Solar Avenue is opposed and wishes to speak.
My name's Harry Sutton. I live on Solar Avenue. I am here representing 11 residents on Solar Avenue, 4 of which are here. Let it be stated that we are not attacking personally the reputation or professionally the people who are involved in this project. There was no way ever meant to be a slight. When this was presented to us at a presentation at Warzella's on a private presentation, we were told it was going to be a single business occupancy and very low traffic, very low keyed project. That has changed at the last council meeting. We were told it would be multi-business. They needed a larger parking lot. There were changes. It's always changes and changes. The key to this whole thing with us as residents, and that everybody seems to be worried about, is the property value change. The rezoning, we know there's going to be a project up there. If it's low impact, we're fine with that. What we're very concerned about is this is setting a precedent to go west for property change, for rezoning to smaller businesses across the street west of Solar Avenue. We already have 2 small businesses over there under the guise of hobbies. We're worried about the zoning moving west. We're worried about the property values. We have no problem with a low-impact business up there. What we have a problem with is the type of businesses that are going to be going west and the property values and how it's going to affect property values. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Robert Pentler on Solar Avenue is opposed and wishes to speak.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak. As Mr. Sutton just said, the Richmond Investment Group is a very, very fine company. And they have been living in a very well-designed, very attractive building down on Mequon Road. One of the concerns that we have, and I have as a resident, is this western spot zoning that would change from residential to commercial. Quite often when you have a combination of a mixed-use zoning from residential conversion to commercial, the values of residential usually go down. The other problem could be spot zoning. There are multiple uses and sites that are available for these gentlemen to use. You have the DPW from the city of Mequon. There's an area adjacent to the Aurora Healthcare Facility, not far from their old building. One of the problems that we have, I think, with the turning of the Solar Heights subdivision to younger families with new children is if there is a change of zoning and it goes further west, that will accommodate, as the other gentleman said, certain commercial businesses that might be disguised or used in a residential structure that may or may not be allowed to be there. One of the other things I mentioned before to a few people was that I helped assist my father in the praising of this building for Chet Warzella. And part of the agreement of that was that there would be no further commercial use west of that building. So maybe it might be worthwhile to put this on hold and check to see if there are any deed restrictions, check the language in the Planning Commission minutes and the development contract at the time that the Warzella building was approved. I disapprove of rezoning to take residential and make it commercial. One of the things and gripes that I've heard for many, many years is that we don't have affordable housing in Mequon. We don't have the sum total unless they're going to be 3,000, 2,500, 50, maybe at the smallest, going all the way up, that can be affordable for young families and people coming into the area. This happens to be a very mature subdivision, and one of my other fears is linked dealing with the Department of Transportation. Many years ago, and some of you remember being on Common Council and Planning Commission, when we talked to the DOT and there was vacant land on the south of Mequon Road, we suggested, because there was no housing, no structures, that they could bend the road to the south. Solar Heights had a group of majestic, 60-foot-high blue spruce trees, and the DOT cut it down. I'm concerned that if the DOT comes in again, maybe they might cut off the bottom entrance to Solar Heights coming on Solar Avenue. Or if they change anything, you had the curb cut. And the lady from planning indicated how important that is, because when that building was built, the major portion of the customers do not have ingress and egress on 76th Street. They come through the curb cut on the south side of Mequon Road to enter Warzella and also Mamma Mia's. So if any change comes in zoning commercially to this whole area, that could also change the plight of the structure of the road. So to me, I think you have a couple different opportunities. One, you can disapprove of the zoning. The gentlemen have a very fine builder, and I can say from personal experience that we have worked with Mickelson family for years, and they always build very high-quality construction. I just do not believe that this should be the place for it when there are a lot of other alternatives. The other thing that could be done is table the discussion and go into some research into the archives of the city of Mequon and see if there's an agreement that says no further development with the contract for that structure. Thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Pentler. And we have one more, Ted Kosinski from Concord Creek, supports and wishes to speak.
Good evening. Thank you for taking a few minutes and allowing me to speak today on the behalf of Richmond Financial and Matt and John Richmond. I've known the Richmonds for the better part of a decade in both a business capacity as well as a personal relationship. And I am also a new resident to Concord Creek. About a year ago, my family of 6 and I moved in. As I see Mequon grow, I think Richmond Financial represents the type of businesses that are very representative to Mequon Road. Quiet, professional, low-traffic businesses. I think the area will continue to grow, and I wanted to extend my support as a man who has a young family, that these are the type of businesses I think would be very good for our area. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. We'll go now to the applicant and let you make a presentation. First, can you please introduce yourselves for everybody?
Thank you. Without being too redundant of what we've covered in the past, I would just simply say that our emphasis has really not changed. We've been under inspection of a variety of properties and locations for more than 12 months, probably closer to 18 months. As I had mentioned at the last meeting, that this site for us seems to be absolutely perfect for our low impact and the small size of the building structure that we are proposing. I have taken into consideration, I listened carefully to the neighbors. The last thing we want to do is create any animosity here. Several of the things mentioned, though, I mean, are just so simply out of our control. I'm not even sure, you know, there are points that I can address. I have no control over what the DOT is going to do now or 3 years from now or whenever they may change that road. We've never had a desire to make a curb cut or an egress or an entrance into Solar Avenue. I can't imagine anybody that would ever come out of our potential office building and go out of their way to turn down Solar Avenue. It just, that makes no sense to me at all. We do want to be, as others have spoken on our behalf, and I appreciate those comments. We want to be great neighbors. We want to continue to be a contribution to our community. We feel that this location is still the most perfect location for us. We will have the opportunity for a quality build that will add value to the property area. I believe my son has passed out the photos. Unfortunately, the other part of the audience cannot see those, but the type of building that we are proposing is of a prairie roof design. There would be a very, very small impact into that area. We want to preserve as many of the trees and vegetation as possible, which I'm pretty confident all of that can be accomplished. We request the rezoning to a B3 because we have such a very low impact business. Our building plan will allow for over 73% of that small space to be left as green space. I mean, when you take into consideration that we're starting out with 1.2 acres and then to leave 73% of that as green space, in my opinion, that has a very low impact on the environment. The actual build will be less distraction and less of an impact than a residential home build. I take that on the advice of experts, primarily because there won't be a basement and we only have a one-story project. The parking area will be a cross-access sharing with the current adjacent businesses. The lighting proposed for our building will be downlights to prevent any light spill to any of the residential areas. And our business workday is essentially Monday through Friday from about 8 to 4:30 when the market closes. We're hardly ever there on holidays that I can think of, and very few, if any, weekends. All of our activity is inside the building. There wouldn't be any outside noise or disturbance or motion to speak of. And our only waste product is shredded paper. We would ask then for your consideration of this rezoning. And I would open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Commissioners, Commissioner Schaefer.
Get all my stuff out of the way. This is beautiful. It's beautiful, and I think, lots of positive comments, obviously, from people who support your business, which is great. My question was going to be about the point raised about Can I ask this? Does Warzella own this lot currently?
Yes?
That's who's selling, okay.
Mr. Sturgenberg, yes.
Okay, yeah. The point raised about deed restrictions and the discussion that was perhaps had when that building was built, is that something that's already been looked into?
To the best of my knowledge, it has been. That was researched before we made our purchase offer on that land, and
there shouldn't be anything.
no hiccup.
Okay, so that might have been more of a verbal discussion that, yeah, I don't know what, I'm trying to go down this road.
Sure, I'm not
Guide me.
aware of any deed restrictions on the property. I mean, certainly, I think we all indicated at the last meeting under the consultation, there has been a general overriding policy by the council, and I think followed through in terms of actions by the council to not drastically change the character of Mequon Road and have Mequon Road considerably overwhelmed with commercial uses. And I speak to that in the staff report as well. However, that is with exception of, certain intersections and areas along Mequon Road. We see that throughout that corridor.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just based on some of, other projects and experience we've had with how things are written or whether they're written or not. If there's nothing that's truly written, then I think that I'm not sure that we can hold that as an argument. I mean, in general, I think that I still continue to have empathy for the neighbors. Everything I said at the last meeting still holds because I understand how you feel and concerned and how you feel like you're being personally impacted. I think that this is being done with the utmost care from what I can see and from what I'm hearing. And there's many other options that could go there that would be much less desirable than this. I think, frankly, I think it's a worthy project.
If I could just comment to that issue, I totally agree with you. I think the one item that lends itself to a significant point is that with this kind of a conditional use and rezone, it absolutely gives the city the full power and authority for all of the oversight as to the landscaping and anything else, the offset distances, which we've already taken into consideration. And you're also absolutely right. I can't tell you how much time that we have spent with other professionals playing the what-if game to make sure that we've tried to take into consideration everything and anything that the neighbor could possibly think of, even the change of the design of the building to the one that's now in front of you, because we felt that would be a real enhancement to that area without being a different kind of a structure in totally. It does not have that commercial look. It actually looks like a high-priced residential home.
It does.
You took my comments. I think this actually has the possibility to increase property values in Solar Heights. As a home builder, this is a beautiful 5,000 square foot custom home. It just happens to be a business. If I were a resident, and I used to be a resident in Knightsbridge, I don't think I could support anything more strongly than this. I think this is a great buffer transitioning from Wauwatosa to the west. I understand the concerns about future expansion to the west, but that's really not what's at stake here. I think having worked in the chamber with the Richmond group, you couldn't ask for better neighbors. You look at their existing building and how it's maintained. I think this is an absolutely fantastic project.
Thank you.
I would just concur with Commissioner Schaefer. The current zoning permits some more onerous uses without any zoning change than we're talking about here. I could see a CBRF that looks much less desirable than this facility. In fact, there have been several proposed and some built on Mequon Road already, and it's likely we'll see more as time goes on. I believe this has the feel and look of a residential property and makes a great transition. It certainly is not a strip mall. It's not Warzella's and that, which you're really cutting that off by putting in such a facility there. So I would support this.
I have to support this as well. It's architecturally interesting. It looks more residential than commercial. And it's certainly a big improvement on a neglected vacant lot.
Right.
The land there, I don't really know why the land remains vacant, but obviously there's been no one so far who's wanted to build a residence on it. And why would you want to put a residence next to the commercial facility that's right on the corner? This is a more appropriate use of the space and more likely use of the space. And I really can't see any downside with making this rezoning recommendation.
Thank
But
you.
I'm still puzzled by that detached garage. What's the point of a detached garage? You're telling me this is an 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday,
Yes.
business-only facility. What's the detached garage for?
That's a very good question, and I'm certainly open-minded to that, but to respond to that, one of the concerns that was issued by one of the neighbors was having any open area disposable structure, such as a recycling, whatever. And I said that I would be willing to pay for the construction of what would look like a detached garage with doorways on it, and then all of the disposable items would be stored inside of that. So
Okay,
it would
so
be, dumpster would be housed in there. There would be nothing outside of the building at all.
So this is not something that would be eventually put to some other so far undisclosed commercial or whatever use?
Nothing could be done without the city's oversight, as best I understand.
Okay. And, you know, I have to tell you, the notion of living next to something which is used from, I think you said 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday, not on holidays, is a much more congenial neighbor than God only knows what a person might get as a residential neighbor.
Right. Yeah. When most of the neighbors are gone at work, we will be there, and when they come home, we'll be gone.
And if a residential neighbor moved in here instead, an aggrieved neighbor next door, unhappy with how that residential neighbor maintains their home or uses their grounds, you have absolutely no control over your neighbors.
Agree.
I think this is, frankly, not only good for the intended use, but an asset to the residential neighbors, even though many of them don't understand it that way.
Thank you.
I like the garage. It adds to the residential feel. And like they said, I'm glad. I was concerned last time. Your other building looks fine, but I wasn't sure that look really belonged when you're transitioning to a residential neighborhood.
Right.
So I do applaud you for your sensitivity, and frankly, it's
Thank you.
really a beautiful building. And I hope when signage comes, we don't, ruin that look. Hopefully, you'll find minimal as people know you. And I have to say, in all my years, I've never seen, we have a great community.
Right.
The churches, people connect through the schools, see people at the restaurants, and now you're pulling that with the chamber and the businesses in the area supporting you, and I'm pretty impressed by the business community. They're very tight and supportive. So at this point, I was very concerned about the residents, and I really didn't know where I was going to vote tonight, because you come and you have to listen. But when someone came here that said he's standing up for 11 of the residents, and he made a lot of good points, but he did say he has no problem with the low-impact business, and that's what you have here. Now, as to the bleeding down the road, it's not my intention whatsoever to let any more go to the west. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we do have a zoning and a land use map that is fluid. It can be changed, but the good news is, I think the politicians that have the right to change that do listen to the residents. So if something would come up in the future, the residents do have a lot to say, because it would be the aldermen ever changing that zoning map with the planning commission. So at this point, I plan to support it.
Thank you.
Mr. Mason?
Yes, thank you for staying in Mequon. You certainly have a great reputation. We appreciate that, and expanding, and I move to approve as documented by staff.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. And just point out for everybody that the rezoning of this property will become effective upon the office development achieving building and site plan approval and the necessary conditional use grant. So we're not just simply blindly zoning this property B3. It will be tied to what you construct, and it's a fine-looking building if that's what you submit.
I understand that, yes.
That's a very fine-looking building. Investment companies come up with some of the best-looking buildings around here.
Most of them.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 8-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item 10 was canceled. On item 11, policy item, City of Mequon is seeking a text amendment to Chapter 58 of the zoning code relating to the rental of single-family homes.
Thank you, Mayor. This was another item that we discussed in, I think, June, and the Common Council did have an opportunity to take a look at this at the first reading under Committee of the Whole. I think like the Planning Commission, it was a lot, to absorb and digest the first night.
Excuse me, I have difficulty hearing you.
Okay. I'll just give a minute until the background noise.
That's good.
Oh, maybe my mic wasn't on. All right, so to begin again, the Planning Commission took a look at this in June. The Planning Commission tabled it. We did go forward with a discussion at the Common Council in terms of a first reading. At the time of the first reading, we give the Common Council an opportunity to have informal dialogue about the policy amendment. And I think, like the Planning Commission felt last time, it was sort of kind of out of the blue, maybe a surprise for the Planning Commission that this was a policy issue that we were dealing with. And I think the council maybe had the same reaction, and there was a need for some time to digest the use and how we might go about regulating it. The Common Council had similar questions and concerns in terms of the timeliness of the text amendment as well as specific regulations. We did leave, I think, the Common Council Committee of the Whole meeting with some general consensus that the committee wasn't looking to prohibit short-term rental opportunities in single-family homes, but that as this increases as a potential trend in the market and it increases in its frequency in the city of Mequon, they wanted to establish some standards or ways to regulate it. And I'm here tonight to suggest that we haven't, or to indicate that we're aware of a few of these uses. We've dealt with, I think, 3 this year, in the past year, and we have on occasion dealt with a couple random issues or concerns that have come up in neighborhoods regarding rentals, short-term rentals. But we're, I think, of the position as well that it's probably better to establish some standards at this point. We can certainly set those regulations and monitor it and bring it back both to Planning Commission and Council in the future if we feel as though they're not working, if they're too restrictive or if they're not restrictive enough. So there's always the opportunity to review again. As a reminder, this text amendment is being sponsored by the mayor. It's related to short-term rental of single-family homes. Like our regulations for other uses in single-family residential zoning districts, we're looking to maintain the goal or maintain the preservation of the stability of single-family neighborhoods. And we do that by controlling density, by controlling traffic, by controlling the amount of unenclosed parking, noise, safety, and congestion. We have also done some research, and we've found that municipalities across the country are also looking to regulate short-term rentals. So that's definitely an indication to staff that there is an increase in frequency. Going back a number of years, you would see regulations such as these in university towns, resort communities, even urban and historic districts. In those particular cases, they're looking for regulations to ensure the stability of the economics in those commercial neighborhoods. When you have a historic district that maybe has older mansions, they're wanting to make sure that these short-term rentals don't expand into single-family neighborhoods, so that they're ensuring the economic viability of some of those historic neighborhoods and historic homes. As mentioned in the staff reports, the city already regulates how owners use single-family homes. We require conditional use grants for guest houses and mother-in-law suites, both of which have a requirement that there's a non-rental component to it. We also regulate through a conditional use grant bed and breakfasts, although that's only allowed in our residential districts that are more rural in character. And we also regulate home occupations. Home occupations are permitted, but home occupations limit someone from offering any services or product for sale on the property. We have had a couple circumstances in the past where people have sort of challenged the extent of the commercial operations of home occupations and have had to take enforcement action on those. We've had people do open houses for, like, we had a circumstance where someone was providing cheese making seminars in their basements and allowing out-of-town travelers to then reside in the home. So there are a variety of these circumstances that have occurred on and off in the community. As I mentioned in the staff report, there's been some recent case law. City of Cedarburg we touched on last month, but I also provided case law for a county's general zoning regulations in the state as well. I provided that as an example of where the courts ruled in favor of the county's zoning to highlight for you what some of the standards are in which to establish these regulations. So essentially, the staff is recommending, as I indicated last month, the creation of a definition for short-term rental of dwellings, and we indicate that it must be an accessory short-term rental, and that word of accessory is critical from a zoning standpoint because it does give legal, I guess, weight to the fact that it's accessory to the principal use of the structure, which is that it's occupied by an owner, and that's its principal use. The definition then follows suit in terms of defining how it becomes, from the city's perspective, only an accessory function. And so in the definition, we talk about the number of guests, the number of bedrooms, and the time frame on an annual basis in which it can be rented. Of course, as we established that accessory short-term rental, we then also provided to the Planning Commission and Council last month a definition for the principal long-term rental of dwellings. And that's your more standard rental agreement that anybody can take advantage of currently. And we just tried to establish the framework for those longer-term rentals. And of course, the term principal suggests that that is the main use of that particular dwelling. I noted in the staff report that once you get to 5 rooms or more, it's defined, the use then is defined as a hotel in the city's zoning district, and those are not allowed in any of our residential zoning districts. So staff is recommending the draft language, presenting that to you tonight as our recommended starting point, and we're of course here to take any feedback on timeframes or any other questions you have about the definitions. If it were to move forward with a recommendation of either support or opposition by the Planning Commission, it would still move forward at the Common Council level for their August meeting.
Thank you, Kim. We have a couple people who have registered. Stan Uzeski.
I will go last, please.
Excuse me?
I will go last, please.
I will go last, please. Okay, James Jody. I will go second. There's a plan here.
Is there a script?
How about Alice Matthews? All right.
She's going first.
Oh, I never called.
Oh, I'm sorry. It says wish to speak first.
You did write it down. The best item for last, that's us. My name is Alice Matthews. I own and reside at 13148 Northwest Shoreland Drive. I'm here this evening to provide some clarification as to what short-term rental of single-family homes involve, the benefits and the inherent rights of property owners to host guests in their home. I was able to watch your last Planning Commission meeting. I found out about this issue in the newspaper that it was being discussed at Common Council. I've contacted several of the aldermen, all of them actually, and several of them have contacted me back on the issue. So I thought it was really important to really create an understanding of what we're looking at here. So that's why I'm here tonight. This proposed ordinance is being sponsored by the mayor, my neighbor, in response to an unfounded complaint from my next door neighbor regarding my small-scale home sharing during the summer months. That's why this has come up. I'm a teacher at the Cedarburg High School and an empty nester. Sharing my home has brought me tremendous joy and provided additional income to upkeep my home and to travel and see my family. I'm very disappointed that the mayor has become involved in what I see as a neighbor dispute. I share a well with my next door neighbor, which is, for some reason, compels her to monitor the activity at my home. She passed on unfounded allegations to the mayor. As he was walking down the street, he told her to send him an email. I've requested the information regarding her complaint through an open records request, and I have not received that information yet. This is not the forum to go into detail about my relationship with my neighbor. This strict and limiting proposal is being presented as benign and well-intended, when in fact it has serious implications as to the degree of control that local government has on property owners. One must look at the makeup of the Mequon community. It's largely made up of residents who do not wish government involvement where it doesn't need to be. The case in Cedarburg that the mayor has referred to has to do with two adjacent homes that were not owner-occupied. This was not their primary residence. It was continually being rented out. That was the issue in Mequon. That's why they had the concerns. That's why they wanted to cite a violation and why they wanted to put something on the books. That's very different from what the three homes that we have here in Mequon. I live in my home. As I said, I teach all year. This is something that I do on a small scale in the summertime. This proposed ordinance is inappropriate on many levels. It makes the assumption that anyone that stays in the community on a short-term basis is someone who should not be trusted. As a host for Airbnb, I can tell you that this service is not just for tourists or partiers. I even heard the term Mequon Mansion thrown out at the last meeting as a party place. Really saddened me. Airbnb operates in 190 countries around the world in 34,000 cities. It's used by many individuals for business, family, events, and travel. Some of the individuals that I've shared my home with within the past 2 years that I've been doing this include a family gathering, the family of a graduating Concordia nursing student, guests who were standing up at a wedding at Shelley's Watermark, a family in town for a funeral, a couple with young children who couldn't be in the same home as their grandpa because he was undergoing chemotherapy, two sisters and their husbands that came into town to visit extended family in Cedarburg, the #1 ranked pro beach volleyball player and his parents who just took 5th place last week at the tournament at Bradford Beach. Next week, I plan to host 2 LPGA golfers who will be here at the end of the month to attend a tournament at Brown Deer. These are good people, and they're visiting our restaurants and the businesses in our community. The Airbnb is a forum for people to connect with that allows people to screen hosts and guests through multiple sources, such as driver's license, email, LinkedIn, Facebook, just as hosts rate their guests the guests rate the hosts. Today's technology provides a transparency that allows hosts and guests to get to know each other, their background, and their purpose for coming to the area. This type of thing couldn't be available 10 years ago. This is not a situation in which strangers pull up to your home and stay like a hotel. I might add that in this proposal, the definition of a hotel is incorrectly stated. If you look up the ordinance, the definition of a hotel states it provides 5 or more sleeping rooms. That word was left out. This does not apply to any of us in Mequon that are doing this. I would like the opportunity to serve as a resource tonight and provide factual information rather than speculative assumptions that could serve to incite and promote fear. We're looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. James Jody on North Lakewood Drive.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My wife and I moved to Lakewood in the fall of 2012. Before we moved here, though, we've had many Airbnb experiences. From 2011 to 2012, we traveled around the world for 10 months. We stayed at Airbnb in Beijing, in Athens, St. Petersburg, Russia. And one of the key things with these internet websites are the reviews. Like Ms. Matthews said, the hosts reviewed us as we traveled around the world, and hosts were able to see what the other hosts said about us. And it's a key indicator about who you're allowing into your home, are these reviews. Not only do the hosts review us, but we also review the hosts. After our stay, we comment, and it's made public to anybody who goes on the Airbnb site. So these reviews are the commodity, or the kind of the, you could say, the money of this sharing economy that, you know, we're kind of slowly moving into. Trust is one of the key elements of these home sharing sites. That's why the reviews are so important. And after our experience as guests throughout the world, that's why we decided to become hosts in Mequon, because not only is it a source of income, but we also meet many interesting people, and we also wanted to share a home with these people and learn about them. So that's part of the personal side of this. As far as the amendment put out there, there was some language on the amendment which kind of struck me. The first one was in paragraph 1, where it says the city maintains the goal of preserving the stability of residential neighborhoods with controls related to density, traffic, unenclosed parking, noise, safety, and congestion. As Ms. Tollefson just said, the recent case in Cedarburg and determined by Ozaki County Circuit Court in February 2015 says short-term rentals are still occupied by a single family at a time. So as far as density, traffic, unenclosed parking, and you could say noise and safety, and especially congestion, we are replacing one single family with another single family. So it does not affect any of those goals of the city. The other element to that statement is the inherent interest of a homeowner that would, just like I mentioned with the reviews, you find a short-term rental that would replicate the same usage as a single-family home owner would use as a primary use. That's exactly why these services have reviews. It's because you do not want another type of usage happening in your home. you want your, as anybody who owns a home understands, they want it to be taken care of, no matter if it's someone you know staying there or short-term rental. So that was one issue with the language and the goals, and how this short-term rentals still meet those goals. In paragraph 2, it says, several cities across the country regulate rentals due to an influx of transient lodging occurring in university towns, resort communities, and urban or historic neighborhoods. As stated in the last meeting by Ms. Tullifson, Mequon is not a resort or tourist community, and does not fit any of the other definitions of university town or urban or historic neighborhood. Paragraph 3 says the general public traveling or vacationing could occupy and use the dwelling differently than a typical owner or a long-term resident, and therefore create a occupancy not intended in single-family neighborhoods. As I've stated already, the reviews and the inherent interest of a homeowner would dictate that it would actually replicate the same usage. Also, I was curious as to where this fact came from, that traveling or vacationing would be a different usage. Finally, there's a couple other thoughts on the case law where it mentions the city of Cedarburg again and Vilas County. Again, the city of Mequon is not a resort community, so that does not seem applicable. Under the section entitled Planning Commission and Common Council Feedback, it says, based on recent case law, a non-monetary exchange is the equivalent of renting. So it was about swapping homes and how that is now included under this. And I'm fearful of a slippery slope where swapping homes could lead to actually limiting the number of house guests I can have in my home, friends and family, and not only myself, but everybody who owns a home in Mequon could fall under some type of rule as to the number of guests that are allowed. One other thing about the under residential zoning district uses, it says the law says for up to 4 overnight guests for no more than 9 accumulative days annually. There I'm curious as to how that number accomplishes the goals, and how 9 days and 4 overnight guests was determined, and the data that shows that that will accomplish those goals. I would like to know what that is. Finally, as I mentioned in the beginning, in effect, this will limit the number of visitors to our area, our great city, and leading to a decrease in business and restaurants, shopping, other services. So just like to thank everyone for their time.
My name is Stan Jeski. I live at 3104 West Bonnewell, at the end of Bonnewell Road, Milwaukee River. Excuse this, everybody's going to ask what it's about. I'm the director of the Center for Sustainable Energy and Power Systems at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I was mildly biking down the street, and a car cut off the bike lane, and I T-boned into it. Helmet saved my life, broke my neck, but here I am. So my message for starters is bike helmets, bike helmets, bike helmets. I live at the end of the Bonnewell Road. 15 years ago, I bought a 1922 hand-laid fieldstone home that the Mequon clay was shoving into the river. It was bent. People called it the gingerbread house. I straightened it out, got it out, made it into a vertical loft. And it's a beautiful place. I'm looking out at my neighbors are on top of the hill, and I'm looking out at the wetland across the way. For most of the last 10 years, I have been in-state and out of the state. I got a 94-year-old mother whose birthday was yesterday in West Dallas, and I come back here from time to time to spend my time with her, and so I keep the home here instead of selling it. And I'm typically over in California through much of the academic year, so I'm here often during the summertime. Now I'm a sailor, so I can often stay on my sailboat. when I'm renting the place, and I rent the place out in the summertime to help carry the costs, just so I can get back here and have the place. I started out on VRBO. Some of you may have used it. Some of you may be using it for swaps, which will become regulated, as I understand it, under this ordinance. I did that for about, I'd say about 7 years. In the last 3 years, I've used Airbnb just because I actually it's a pretty significantly more world population. Matter of fact, tonight I had to leave because I had and it's family coming in from Italy, a mother, her daughter, and her daughter's girlfriend, and they're going to be staying there for 8 days. Now, I have never heard from any of my neighborhoods in the 10 years I've been doing this, any complaints. Now, I will accept the possibility someone complained to someone and the enforcement people can't tell me who they are. Okay? What I'd like to know, and here's my offer to you. My offer to you is to really give you some solid feedback on this. I arrived 2 days ago. Alice told me this thing was going on. I came here. I quick looked at the memo. I think it's fair to say there is not enough of an evolved ordinance that I can look at and understand. And in 1970s, I was a staff for the Assembly Committee on Local Affairs. I staffed the committee that wrote the first Uniform Dwelling Code in Wisconsin. So I understand local government, and I understand your role. I'd like to say to you, as an observer from the outside and as a citizen here, I'm troubled by one significant thing, which is the way this has been handled up to this point. I remember last summer, I had my neighbor come up to me, who's a contractor who works regularly with the city, said, are you running a bed and breakfast over there? I said, well, no. Where's this coming from? He says, well, over in City Hall, people are talking about it. As a citizen, I'm a little troubled by that. I'm a little troubled about gossip. I'm a little troubled about policy being driven by little interpersonal neighborhood disputes. I know this neighbors on either, 3 neighbors on either side of me. We got a doctor, we got a contractor, we got a family who has a place that's been in their home, their family for generations, who shut it down in the wintertime. The one next to it's a sailor like me. The one next to that's a landscape contractor who recently got approval to run a full-scale landscaping business in an R1. When we have problems, we talk to them about it. When the kids at that landscaping contractor is working over there are speeding down the roads and potentially endangering the kids on Bonnewell, we go over and talk to them. We don't go whining to City Hall. We don't go gossiping among one another. We'll talk to them directly. I'd like to say as a point of departure that is the solution here. Now, after I heard that from my neighbor, I said, well, where's this coming from? Couldn't say. In October, I got this letter. Do you know this? Do any of you know of this? Because what I'm going to be talking to you about is how these things are enforced at the enforcement end once you set policies. I got a letter that says, first of all, it's not on any city stationery. Stanley, it has come to our attention that a B&B may be conducted at your residence. Your zoning does not allow for this type of business under R1. Please call with any questions and please stop conducting business at this time. Folks, I've been paying taxes. I've done my duty for the country, paid my taxes here, been a law-abiding citizen. It sounds like to me they're implying that I'm doing something wrong. I don't think this is a good way to introduce this issue to those of us, who didn't know we were doing anything wrong. I think a courtesy call would have been appropriate. When I came back later that spring, I spoke to this gentleman and the guy who wrote this at this counter in the city, and I said, listen, can you acknowledge you have not got any ordinance that really lays this out? And I think there's an agreement, and I think we agreed at that time. That wasn't quite there. And my stick to them was, guys, this is heavy-handed. This is what makes me scared about this kind of ordinance. Not the intention you have, but the manner in which it will be enforced by staff that has a whole lot of things to take care of, by elected officials who have a whole lot of agendas who can put pressure on staff. I'm troubled by that. I'm troubled by that. Well, then we got another letter that came after that saying, because the discussion we had when I went over there and talked to your staff was, these are not bed and breakfasts, and their general response is, well, you're listed on Airbnb. Doesn't that mean you are by definition a bed and breakfast? And I explained to them, no, it doesn't mean that at all. And that is certainly no basis for administrative fiat and enforcement action by city staff. Now, thirdly, we got this letter, and I don't have it with me. The one that said, we demand that you supply us a business plan. Explain, essentially proves that you're not doing what you're doing. Now, how would you feel if you received something like that in the mail? I'm supposed to prove that I'm not doing something and provide a business plan to do that? Now, this happened when I was in California. I believe that came in springtime. I don't remember. Do you remember when that was issued?
I don't off the top of my head.
That was issued by your staff, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the request was made for a business plan. I got the letter late. The mail was forwarded to me. So I didn't get a chance to cover cycling back. And then what I heard is, again, apparently others did not submit it, or there was no follow-through, but whatever it appears, the district court has given you a little spanking, telling you there's a little bit of an overreach. I have not read that decision. I don't know what's going on there. But all I'm going to suggest to you is that there is a pattern of conduct here that as a citizen and someone who pays their taxes and operates under the law is troubling to me. Now, here's what I would like to have in order to move forward in this in a positive manner. I would like to have, I saw a bit of a summary. I would like to see the detailed facts supporting this. Is this really just a fear? Is this something where someone spoke to the mayor and they were scared and, well, gosh, this is a new thing? And I say this spending a lot of time in California. The reference to San Francisco, by the way, is completely inappropriate because this is upended by the rent control out there. That dynamic plus Airbnb is causing the significant problems in San Francisco. There's a unique dynamic out there by virtue of rent control being in place where Airbnb-type places are creating problems for enforcement of rent control at a time when property values are going up and a lot of people are being displaced. You know these stories. Well, I would like to have an opportunity to see what the full rationale is instead of generalizations about other municipalities who are looking at this. I'd like to see which ones have done something and what those are. And I think we need to do that. Otherwise, I get a little bit fearful that maybe what you're doing is being driven by an elected official who has an agenda here, and there aren't enough facts to support it. I would like to know how many complaints there have been against the three of us who've been doing this here on Airbnb, because we've been mentioned in the papers. I was minding my own business, keeping things quiet, not having any complaints in my neighborhood. And now we're in the paper, there are three of us. And I even got a couple of calls from people who were from Mequon, representing they were making arrangements for someone, and then they dragged it on and dragged it on, then they canceled it. This is unfortunate and nasty, and this was happening to me from California when I was monitoring this. So I'd like to request that you make sure that you have them show you the facts, not distillations of them or generalizations about them. If you want us to be a part of this, why couldn't you have given us a call before this? Why couldn't I have gotten a courtesy of a phone call saying this meeting was taking place, this discussion was taking place? Would you like us to be a part of this? Or are you trying to slam this through? If so, why would you not invite the very people who are being regulated just to make a comment on it and give them something they can really look at? You don't have an ordinance right now, so that's why I can simply share my circumstance and my experience with your staff. I cannot give you an informed response to whatever is being proposed because as best I can see, it's not been proposed yet. I want to understand what the consequences are so we can give you feedback, and I'm willing to do that. And if it gets to be too much of a hassle, I will shut down. I will shut down the place and just stay there myself. I don't have to do this. I do this because I enjoy having people come here from other parts of the world and the country. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add? You had a list of communities that were working on or that had ordinances, half a dozen, 10. I certainly remember the city of Milwaukee, a gentleman owned 2 homes, and he was renting them out on VRBO, I think it was at the time, and there was a lawsuit the city sued him and he sued the city. They mutually agreed to leave each other alone, and he would not rent his houses out anymore. They claimed they were hotels. Now, we know your houses aren't hotels, but they are commercial use in a residential neighborhood. And most people that I've talked to about this don't like the idea of a commercial use next door to their house. You may have the most wonderful guests in the world, but we can't legislate that. So what we do try and legislate is business use in a business district and a residential use in a residential district. And for all the years I've been here, residential use was owner-occupied, single-family, however you want to define that specifically, but not essentially a hotel operating in a residential neighborhood. And, you know, yes, I got complaints from people in my neighborhood, and I forwarded them to city staff. And I understand city staff went on Airbnb and found out who was doing it. Simple as that.
I'm sorry, Cantor, you said the staff found out what?
Staff went on Airbnb and found out who had their houses for rent.
Yep.
And
It's transparent.
yeah, it is. And so with the concern that was expressed by a number of people, we just thought it was something that the city should consider regulating, because we don't want to have problems like they've had in other communities. So that's the extent of my involvement.
Sir,
Let
if I may
me-
say,
Excuse me,
to
excuse me.
represent that these are commercial
Point of order, this is his time to talk.
Right. And to one of your other points, at last month's council meeting, we had a public hearing on this ordinance. No one showed up. Okay. Kim?
Yeah, let me just try to address a couple things that were mentioned from the public regarding the issue. Nowhere in our memo or in our previous discussions have we pointed to specific issues that have been identified at these sites or complaints regarding their operations. And that is not the premise in which we brought the policy or the text amendment forward. We brought it forward as we bring many public policy issues as it relates to operations, uses within certain zoning districts, what's permitted as accessory, what's conditional, and what's prohibited. So as we're made aware of an increase in these types of operations, just like an increase in changes in the commercial market. We have uses that don't, e-cigarettes, vapor stores. We just went through a text amendment because there was an interest in our commercial zoning districts to allow for those that haven't been accommodated before. So as staff hears about either the private market responding to certain types of uses, we administratively bring those forward as policy amendments. Nowhere in the memo or the text amendment, nor I think, at least at a common council level, perhaps there was some discussion at last month's planning commission, but nowhere in our memo are we suggesting an interest, at least at a professional staff perspective, that these uses be prohibited. We offered that up as an opportunity for the planning commission to consider if there was great concern after hearing about the increase or the trend, but that was never our position. In terms of some of the public testimony regarding the services that are used or the internet-based services, there's no mandate, nor could there be by the city, to operate through those types of services. So we have to understand that when we write regulations, we're writing regulations for sort of the lowest common denominator, and it's not based on the character of individuals operating. We don't base our character on who operates businesses in our commercial district. There's not that type of evaluation that happens at a zoning perspective. Those types of matters will catch up to individuals in their own business and their operational plans, all on their own, not having government interject into those. Yes, it's true that Mequon is not a resort community. We're not really a university town either, although there is some examples brought forward tonight that people associated with the university took advantage of these types of services. We agree and understand that it's an alternative option for transient lodging. We understand the potential benefit for additional income. Those can be all benefits to the private property owner. However, while there isn't any specific complaints about operations or these being party houses, I mean, we have had those circumstances before, but not with the individuals here tonight. It's really about the accumulative impact of these uses and that it could have in a single-family residential neighborhood. I'm also not going to suggest by any factual data my statement in that transient users could potentially use these dwellings or operate in a single-family neighborhood other than what an owner-occupied resident would. I'm saying it could happen. I'm saying that's what can happen in transient neighborhoods, and that runs contrary to the public benefit expressed here about preserving the stability of single-family neighborhoods. It's also critical when you do zoning analysis and you do that public policy related to text amendments that you upfront and very early on establish what the public benefit goal is that you're trying to achieve. Because if people can agree on that, the regulations of the text have to follow that particular purpose statement. We do that in every one of our zoning districts, and every zoning code across the country would do that as well. In terms of other municipalities and what's appropriate for our community, we can certainly share tons and tons of data about what other communities do, but we're looking at our specific community's conditions, and I think the years of service that I think Jack and I have been with the city of Mequon, we have a pretty good understanding of what the public policy interest is related to this. And we also look to the precedent of how the zoning districts are established and those regulations and how those have worked in the past. As I mentioned in the staff report, single-family residential zoning districts are already regulated in terms of the types of commercial activity that you can have there. And there's also a public statement in there about the ability or the review authority by the city in terms of rental. We specifically talk about guest houses, mother-in-law suites, and bed and breakfasts as uses in our single-family residential districts, and the process in which we handle those are through conditional use grants. This is not outside of that same level of process or review that the city has taken before in terms of lower impact commercial or additional non-income producing living units in single-family districts. So I don't, from a professional planning and zoning perspective or land use perspective, I don't see that establishing some minimum criteria to allow for these type of operations is outside of the public policy intent or the regulations that the city has established in the past. And those are regulations that have been in place prior to the 1994 zoning code.
Yeah. Under one of the circumstances, if we get to greater than 2 rooms, we have to have a conditional use. What's the process for obtaining a conditional use grant by a residential owner?
The application comes to Planning Commission, as all your other conditional use grants under zoning do, and the Planning Commission's decision is final unless it's appealed, or the zoning code has a broad general statement that if the Common Council wants to confirm the Planning Commission's action on a conditional use grant, it can be brought up to the council for further review.
Does that mean, for example, if someone wants to take advantage of Airbnb, rent out more than 2 rooms, they have to appear before us to get permission?
Not the renter, the person operating it needs a permit.
Well, I'm talking about the owner of the house.
Yeah, and Airbnb has nothing to do with it.
Well, no, but if they choose to do that, take advantage of that service, and therefore they are in the process of renting out part of their home for as participating in the service, and they need a conditional use grant, they have to appear before us to get it?
Correct.
So we could see hundreds of those over time.
I don't know if that you'd see hundreds.
Well,
I don't know what the number
assuming
is.
this grows in popularity, as we've seen it tend to be the case, this activity would increase appearing before us. in order to comply with the current proposed ordinance.
Well, yes, because there's no process or established permit for it currently. If, like in other circumstances, although we haven't taken this approach with guest houses and mother-in-law suites, you see a handful of those annually. You know, I would say maybe 4 to 6 on an annual basis. You're probably going to see that similar amount here, but the Planning Commission always has the ability, after multiple reviews of certain types of uses, that you think the process should be different, then you can make those
example,
policy and text amendment changes. at
Homeowner
those
had to
times.
appear once a year, say, I'm going to participate in Airbnb whenever, and therefore I can do that without having to reappear every time.
It wouldn't be annually, no. It's just like your conditional use grant granted for, we talked about the office development, the Richmond Investment Advisors. They receive a conditional use grant.
They get it one time and that's
They get it one time, and the operations are outlined in that conditional use grant. It's recorded. And they're allowed to operate that type of activity at their property.
This really becomes more of a simple registration process, saying, I'm going to do this.
Registration and the conditional use grant, like all others, like guest house, mother-in-law suites, bed and breakfast, it does provide that public notification, as well as in the event that operations do not go according to plan, or there are people who are not as good of operators as some of those that are present here tonight, and there is matters that do have a negative impact in that neighborhood, the city has the ability to take appropriate action, and it allows us for proper record keeping.
In other words, basically, the homeowner is still under the constraints of an R1 zoning, no matter what the renter's doing in their property.
Correct.
So we would still have all those controls as though we would have it over any residential property
Correct.
owner. So that wouldn't change.
Right.
So all we're really saying is we're providing a process whereby we know that there's occasional rental going on in that property, and it's registered with the city, and we have, can take proper actions if necessary.
Yes, and we've established, I guess, a distinction between that short-term rental as an accessory function to an owner-occupied single-family home compared to the principal long-term rental of a home, which property owners all over the place rent out their home full-time for a full year lease agreement.
Just out of
and so we've
curiosity,
designed that.
just out of curiosity, how would that affect, say I'm a homeowner and I have an extra bedroom I would rent to a Concordia student? How would that come, would that be affected by this?
For the year, for a full
For a
year?
semester or
For more,
whatever, yeah.
no, that's permitted already. We're just clarifying that in the code.
Because in my view, there's the issue of liability, but that would apparently fall on the homeowner no matter what.
Correct.
And as far as notification is concerned, if you do this conditional grant, and there was also a notification of the adjacent neighbors, which there's language to that effect under the forum, or in the proposal from last meeting, that makes some sense, because I think we do have a community where if you see individuals in a neighborhood who don't appear to be normally there, and burglaries occur most often in the daytime. And we've lived in communities where they back a truck up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, clean the house out, and they're gone in an hour. And if somebody doesn't spy that, nobody catches that. So, and once you've got people coming in and out that aren't familiar, it's good to know that there's some permitting activity going on at that time. And I think there is a police issue to that extent. Police normally know whomever owns any property in the city. In the event there's an issue, they can contact them or whatever. It would seem appropriate if you're going to be renting, they should be aware that there's going to be other people other than the known owners in occupancy at that time. So that's where I am on this, and I just don't think we need a very overly complex process.
Right.
And I think by having 2 flavors of it, maybe gets a little more complex than it needs to be right now.
I did modify that from last month. We got rid of the type 1 and type 2 and just made it straight across the board an accessory because, you know, we had it listed as 1 to 2 bedroom versus 3 to 4. Most homes in the community are not 2 bedrooms or less. So we basically be dealing with 3 to 4 bedroom homes regardless. It would be more, when we talked a little bit about enforcement and how that can be challenging, just like it can be for the guest houses. You know, it would be difficult for us to monitor whether only 1 or 2 bedrooms of the 4 bedroom,
I think also limiting the number of nights, for example, is a bit Because that sort of in effect does limit the use of, say, Airbnb. If they do this fairly regularly, that could limit their ability to do that. I don't see a necessity in that, frankly.
Sure, and that was raised as a question too by the public. I mean, we initially chose 8 days because we thought that allowed for one full week of rental or it allowed for one weekend of rental per quarter. But we really defined it as less than the 30-day rental to make the distinction between the long and the short term.
If they do it
If we want to provide more flexibility for more rental, you can look at starting out by
if they do it
doubling
more
them.
on a repetitive basis, but not only over short periods of time like weekends, the cumulative effect of that over the space of a number of months could be more than 9 nights, my point.
Right.
Which, does that mean then they have to reapply, or what does that?
No. It would just be the conditional use grant and the permit. That would.
Once they exceed nine nights, what's that mean? Does that mean they can't rent it anymore, or what?
Yes, we are going to trust, as we do in all other cases, that people are going to operate in accordance with their approval. It wouldn't be until there were issues identified, likely from a neighbor, that there would be enforcement taken.
But what's the benefit in that limitation? If they chose a couple of weekends a month for 3 or 4 months, 5 months out of the year, the summer, why should we make them go through extra hoops to do that?
Maybe I'm not following your question.
Well, if you get over the 9 days, they're suddenly kind of stymied. I don't know why that's an arbitrary number. But
are you advocating for more days per year?
What I'm saying is that they should be able, I don't see any reason we should limit the use of the services that are out there, like Airbnb, to some arbitrary, like when they can and when they can't, so long as they comply with the rules.
He's confusing.
That's one of the rules.
Well, but the rule, why limit the number of days? I don't quite understand that.
Well, limiting the number of
There's
days.
two situations here.
Limiting the number of days has an impact on those potential accumulative negative impacts for that single-family residential neighborhood.
Well, I don't know. We have residents here who are doing it with is the 9 days an issue with you?
Don't let this happen.
Excuse me. It's the commission here discussing this.
No, I'm just curious.
Well, you can ask it through him then. Don't
All right,
ask
through the mayor or whomever, through you. I just think that an arbitrary number of days usage is unnecessary.
Certainly, that's debatable by the commission. If you want to talk about granting more flexibility, we can have that conversation. But I do need that direction then and an understanding of how much flexibility you want to grant.
I feel there's a little confusion. I see this as two things. We're starting out with either, and we made it 8 days or 9 days, I don't care, either one, once a year. And then they just go to staff and they get a little permit, right? Or you do it a total of 8 days a year to a weekend, basically 4 times a year each season. Now, if this Airbnb, this is the way I'm reading this, and I may be wrong, wants to keep going at a much more nights, then they come to the planning commission for conditional use. And that's a time that the public, which would be the neighbors or whatever, can come and say their opinions when the conditional use comes forth. And I think that's where the whole argument's going to be, or discussion is, the rights of residential versus the rights of the neighbors. And I think I'd have to start from day one and know what is the definition of residential zoning. I think it's long-term people that live in their homes, but I'd have to have you go through all that. But anyway, so I think we're talking either the average person with any house can do either 8-day rent or 9-day rental once a year, or 2-day rentals 4 times a year.
Well, that probably understand, but
Now,
still.
they can just go to staff, and they get that.
Okay, but-
No, they get a conditional use grant.
They need a conditional
Does
use for
that
that
take away
too?
the 9, does conditional use grant take away the 9 days?
No.
No, it's
If you want to rent your house for short-term rentals for up to 9 days annually, you have to have a conditional use grant.
Okay, I understand that.
If you
but
do
all
10
I'm saying
days,
is that
technically you violated it.
you're saying arbitrarily that they can only do this over 9 days in a year.
Yeah.
No matter what.
It's not arbitrarily, it's we're.
Well,
talking
we
about
are,
goals.
we're choosing to pick that number out of the air.
Yeah, I mean, there's, the council discussed this, and half the people didn't want to allow it at all, so 9 days allows you to do it if you want to do it for graduation, or you want to do it for Harley Fest, or, you know.
That's right, it was for special events.
Yeah, I think we've explained.
Allows an
from-
opportunity for people to do that, but.
We gave a justification for why we had initially chose the 8 days, and there was a suggestion to go to 9. That's up for debate.
I don't care.
Commissioner Marchese.
Thank you. Couple of questions. As this is written, it does not preclude any owner of a single-family residence from using a service like Airbnb, correct? I mean, this isn't taking away their right to use Airbnb, is it?
No, it has nothing to do with the service. It just has to do with short-term rental of their dwelling.
So, I mean,
That's not a factor.
right, when I hear that, you know, it's government overreach, my first question is, well, let's test that. And the answer is, no. This doesn't have to do with any service, Vrbo, Airbnb. It's an individual owns a house and wants to rent it out. According to this, they still have the right to do it, short-term, based on accessory short-term rentals. So you're not taking away any property owner's rights with this.
Correct.
But you are saying you can only do it for 9 days a year.
Correct. Through a conditional use grant.
Oh, and you're also saying you got to come in and get a permit if you want to do it for 9 days.
Correct.
So it's a process. So if I own a home and I own another home in Florida and I want to go to Florida for 3 months, could I rent my home to someone while I was in Florida for 3 months?
You could enter into the long-term agreement, but then the lease has to be for the more than the 30 days, and the requirement then is also more than 180 days annually. Because in zoning, when you define a principal use, it has to be the majority of the use then. And so the majority in this particular case, well, probably more like 182, but the majority is how that use is being, how you're operating that use on an annual basis.
So then the rub is, or as I am sensing this, is the rub is, I want to access a service, and I want to rent my property more than 9 days annually. That's the only thing that would maybe crop someone's ideas of using their home or residence. And once you come to that, then it comes down to, I mean, what the mayor and what Alderman Adams said. How does that fit with the neighborhood? How does that fit with your neighbors? I mean, do you want to start playing with that date and say, no, you can do it 60 days annually? Well, then you have this kind of circle of people coming in and out of the neighbor and all of the things that we have been talking about. Do you see what I'm trying to do is distill this thing down to what is the pinch point? And in my mind, it seems like we aren't taking away rights. If you want to rent it for longer than 9 days, you know, there are other ordinances. I don't think anybody's going to complain about a one-time conditional use because, as I understand it, we need that and we need this in case something bad goes at the property, because then you can bring in the resources, right? You can bring in the building inspector and anybody else in order to make sure that all other ordinances. So then it comes down to how much is 9 days? I don't know. I mean, to me, 9 days is probably a little short. If you said, would I go for 15 days? I'd probably say you're hitting against. I mean, if I had somebody who was renting their bedrooms in their house every 5 days, so it'd be 3 times a year. That might cause a little, do you see what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, I mean,
You know where I'm trying to get at?
Right. I mean, if you
What's
look at
issue?
if you look at the 9 days, I mean, that's one full week spanning 2 weekends or 4 weekends a year. And so we were basically saying 1 weekend a quarter.
Right.
I mean, yes, you're trying to gauge what is reasonable. I mean, if you double that and you're looking at 18 days, that's 2 full weeks spanning 2 full weekends, so a total of 4 weekends, or a total of 9 weekends throughout the year. So, 2 weekends every quarter.
And
Is that something that's normal and customary in a single-family residential district with that type of transient lodging?
Right. The other thing, when you come down to the rights of an individual,
But they're in residential.
I mean, if I say to myself, I'm an empty nester, I got 3 bedrooms, I only use 1, I might do a little income supplementing by using a facility like Airbnb to make a certain cash flow come to me. And that's what would drive the number of days. It wouldn't be driven by what's the impact on my neighbors or anything like that. I mean, so I'm trying to weigh that off. Do I have an objection to someone generating revenue from an asset they wholly owned? Honestly, no, I don't. But then then the conflict becomes, but what about the neighbors on the other side? This, by the way, is why I think policy is so interesting, because you're tinkering around with nuances.
Well, there's multiple stakeholders involved,
Oh,
definitely,
absolutely.
yep,
I mean,
with different interests and benefits, of course. I mean, you can look at
It's
the option
zoning.
as all.
Zoning.
Pardon me?
This is about zoning.
Right. It's not about the character of the user. It's not about the character of the operator. We don't make decisions on whether people are good business owners or bad business owners. We're trying to accommodate a trend in a use, just like we accommodate other uses, commercial uses that are not only from a private market, driven standpoint, but also there's at times uses that are only of interest in particular communities, and you have to kind of draft it based on that local feel and character that people are accustomed to.
Well, can we get a definition, of what residential is or residential zoning? Don't we have it in our code? And, because we need to interpret what we're dealing with. It's our job to deal with zoning.
Sure. I mean, the definition of your single-family residential neighborhoods will indicate, that it's intended for single-family use. Our variations in our zoning districts for single-family basically are more geographic in nature. In terms of like our R1 rural district, we talk about larger lots, that are mixed with rural character in terms of agricultural types of uses. That's why you'll see, bed and breakfast, country inns listed in some of those rural residential districts. And then as you start to, go down the hierarchy of smaller scale lots, we go from describing it from rural to more suburban, smaller lot sizes. And that's where you'll see, some of that change in the types of uses that you can do. I mean, for example, you guys were part of the change in the ordinance for the chickens, right? So we did make a distinction on whether you can have chickens on your property or not based on the public purpose statement of those residential districts. Once we got below 1.5 acres in lot size, which speak to sort of the character of that neighborhood, right? The spaciousness of the neighborhood. The Planning Commission and Council chose that after 1.5 acres, you didn't want to see chicken coops because you didn't think it fit with the character of those smaller lot sizes.
I just to finish my thought, and then it's, I understand the property right thing, but I also know you have different property rights if you're in a business area, retail, restaurant. This is residential. They own their house in a residential zoning. So I guess I tend to lean towards residential in my mind is a family that lives there, not different families at all the time, moving in, moving out. I think that's what our community would think.
If I could follow your line of thinking, Alderman Adams, earlier in your comments, initially we had kind of tiered this based on the number of bedrooms, which would then, well, it was always limited on the number of guests. But I mean, if the commission is generally feeling that 8 or 9 days annually is not something that would be negatively impactful on the neighborhood, you could make that a permitted accessory use, but you still have to get a permit, so it's on record with the city. But as Alderman Adams, I think, first thought the way this was written, if it was beyond the 9 days, then you are triggering the conditional use grant. I mean, I think it kind of depends on what everybody's feeling is the threshold of being potentially impactful in a negative way versus a positive way. I mean, you could establish the tiering that way based on the number of days requested. That way, as you're increasing those number of days, transient gas, there's more of an evaluation and review process by the city that you have to go through and a broader public notification. Initially, we talked about the permit approval just being, at an administrative level, and that there would be notification of your 3 immediate neighbors, just to make everyone aware. Obviously, the conditional use grant is much farther reaching in terms of regulatory review. So that's an option if you're feeling comfortable with those 8 to 9 days. I like that option.
Can you just go through that track one more time? So we'd have the ordinance, you would use everybody could do it for 9 days, but if you wanted to exceed, do it more than 9 days annually, then the permit requirement kicks in.
Then the conditional use grant process is triggered. Regardless, you submit a permit to the Community Development Department, so we understand, just like we do with home occupations and community-based residential facilities, these other uses, guest houses, we have a record of who's operating that way, but we've defined that amount of uses as not being overly impactful to the single-family neighborhood. But as it becomes more than 9 days, you have to come and get a conditional use grant or a special approval through the Planning Commission to do that.
And when that individual would appear, then they would have to indicate how many more times than 9 they want to do it.
Correct, and the conditional use grant would record those operations and it would be recorded at the county. So there's stricter, set of standards in terms of operations.
I really like that.
Well, help me understand, because I didn't understand from our prior discussion that beyond the 9 days is simply another process. The 9 days is not a limit that says after you hit 9 days that year, you're done.
It was written that way, but as we're having this dialogue about
Now you're modifying
appropriate,
Now you're modifying
I'm offering ideas and suggestions that maybe help draw the line between impact and non-impact.
I don't see a problem with a process which allows you to go beyond with permission, but just arbitrarily saying, no, you can't ever do that, to me is a difficulty.
Sure.
So, as we're speaking now, so I understand, when the applicant would come forward for their conditional use grant, they would be proposing what it is they're looking for, and we'd have to approve on each individual case, be it 3 or 6 a year. Now, obviously, we're going to set a precedent. If we allow one guy to have 30 days, pretty much we're going to allow anyone to have 30 days. So, in my opinion, it's better to take care of it now, because once you give one of these operators 30 days, they're all going to be coming back looking for 30. Or if we give one 45 days, they're all going to be looking for that. So, from my perspective, if I were moving in this community and I was looking at a home, I would like for there to be some way for me to know that my neighbor in an R1 residential zone is renting their property. Not to say that there's anything negative happening in these areas, but if I'm about to invest my money in a home, I would like to have some means of notification that somewhere within the relative geographic area that I'm purchasing a home, this is happening. And it would have an impact, in my opinion, as to whether or not I want to choose to live there.
Yeah, if it's happening on a regular basis, yes.
They can rent it for 180 days.
I understand that.
Or a year, or 5 years, for that matter. But what we're trying to control is short-term rentals, where you'd rent to a different person every day of the year. theoretically, no one's going to do that, but, you know, every 2 days there's somebody new living there, and you walk past the house and you wonder who the heck is there today.
Right.
And that's, I think, what makes people uncomfortable and why we want to restrict that. And if you're renting your house out, you know, 5 days a week for 4 months out of the year, that's a business. You're running a business.
Correct.
And there's a whole lot of things that, you know, we don't want to see in residential neighborhoods, and I think that's one of them.
Can I, Kim, I was misunderstanding earlier. It didn't mean I want to do it the way that you're saying.
No, I know, I just
I want
offered
to
it.
be, I guess, on record after all this discussion of saying, I feel strongly in residential areas, and I'd be willing to do the 2 weekends and the 1 week once a year, or, you know, the same amount of days, which is 8 in this case, 4 times a year. And I think that that gives expectations, if you bought into the community, that you know how limited it is. And those people have to come get a permit, and they tell the people 3 houses away, so you know when the renters are there. To me, that's a good starting point. We can massage this down the road, you know, if we have to, if we're running into a lot of problems.
So are you suggesting, Alderman Adams, that?
What you have
we-
here.
Oh, in addition, so the conditional use grant would be required as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you still want 9 days, correct?
I think it's
Annually.
reasonable. I mean, I don't think that anyone needs, that's my personal opinion, but I also think it's what the residents would want, is to know it's in general. Now, once this gets into law, you know, I wish we had a lot more input from all types of people in this situation, but we're not getting it yet. When it takes place, we'll hear about it.
Right.
And then we can always react.
They move in next to you, that's when
I mean.
Yeah, we'll, at a staff level, we'll receive inquiries about it, both by the operators, both by
these are
neighbors,
residential
and we
houses.
can track, you know,
but there's still-
what
but
the
it's an asset they can
variations
use.
are, and bring back changes if we need to.
Couldn't I have a bar?
I say if you want your residential house as an asset to get a lot of income from short-term renters that come a day or 2 days, then maybe you should move into a business
But I think
district.
the example that Commissioner Parcheesi mentioned, where we're an empty nester, and you're going to supplement your retirement income or whatever with periodically, once or twice a month, renting out a room.
Well, you can rent it out for 30 days at a time or
Yeah, but
whatever.
that's all in one piece.
Well, that's what I'm comfortable with in a residential
But as
district.
opposed to being able to do that twice a month for 12 months out of the year. You can't do that under this
No,
situation.
Then we disagree, respectfully disagree.
How could you do that under this, the way it's
Can't,
written now?
you can't.
Can't.
No,
So an empty
control.
nester would be prevented from using their asset to do that.
They can use their asset in a more organized fashion of
They could
bringing
rent it on
someone
a-
in for 30 days, or what did you say, 90
A
days?
longer term.
But
The
they
longer
could,
terms.
but they could run it continuously.
Well, if they want a
So
business.
there's no, you've got a gap in the middle between the occasional usage and the full-time usage. Full-time's okay, but the occasional usage isn't. It just doesn't wash.
The rest of the world is moving that way. This is
right.
This is this barter, you know, Internet of Things. That's the way the world is moving. That's why I'm really glad that this is in front of us, because you might as well talk about it now and wrestle with it, because 5 years from now, it's going to be a whole different world in renting apartments. I mean, they opened up Cuba to American citizens, and Airbnb inside of 2 weeks had more rooms rented than the Marriott. This is the future. So we might as well wrestle with it. And to your point, I couldn't agree more. Once you set a number, that will be the number. The first person that comes in and asks for a conditional use, if you say, oh, you can have 30, it's 30.
Yeah, that will become the standard.
Yeah. Tough
Until
issue.
someone asks for 90.
Then you're going to have precedents or something like that.
It's just like we always use the 65 decibel whenever we're talking about noises, right? That goes in every one of our conditional use grants now. It's not in the code, but we take the opportunity to put it in every conditional use grant.
Commissioner Mason?
So, Kim, I just need to clarify on, with a conditional use grant, could, what Commissioner Marchese was saying, could he rent his home for 3 months while he goes to Florida for the winter? Can he rent for a 3-month window?
No.
No, there's,
You'd basically have to ask for a variance at that point, and you'd be going to Board of Appeals, and you'd have to make a case for what's unique or unusual circumstances on your property that should
Okay.
afford you
additional time.
Okay, so he could not, with what you're proposing, he could not do that. Okay. Could we rent to a Concordia student for the 9-month school semester
Yes, with no process.
with nothing?
There's no process, right.
So we could rent for 9 months, but we can't rent for 3 months.
You can rent for 6 months, and if they leave after 3, what did you can't stop it.
Okay. And with a conditional use grant, can the Airbnb people do what they want to do?
I have no idea what Airbnb wants to do or can do. That doesn't matter. That service does not matter.
Okay.
There's other services. Yeah. You could put an ad on Craigslist.
You don't even have to use it. Yeah, you don't have to use any kind of service. I mean, we had circumstances where someone
Well, not
was...
the service, but can they rent, could they rent to a different group of people every week?
Under this regulation, a different group of people every week for the whole
With a conditional
year.
use grant, could I rent to somebody, a different group every week for the entire year?
No.
Thank you.
And that's the type of thing we're trying to
Yes.
prohibit.
We lost Commissioner Marchese.
Lost a quorum, had a quorum.
I'm sorry.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
I don't think it's going to work. Are we to the point of having to approve this, or are we still working on things?
Well, I mean,
It goes to the common
I guess the greatest concern I'm hearing is, this middle ground and the time frame. So I guess it depends on where the consensus is lying here. I mean, the time frame is somewhat of an arbitrary number in which we're just trying to gauge reasonability based on what we know about our community and based on the purpose statement of the single family. If you ask me to, if you want to table it and ask for more work, I need specific directions on what you would like me to come back with, pros and cons of.
If we put it to a vote tonight and it made it, it would go to council. If it didn't pass, would it still go to council?
Correct.
I'm going to make a motion to approve.
The way it's written?
As
Yeah,
is.
as is.
I'll second that. One other question, Kim. In your definitions, if you're an empty nester, Dave, and he wants to rent a bedroom to a college student for 3 months, while he's still living in the house, does that fall under this definition? Or is this a definition where you're renting your house and you're not there? Does that make a difference?
Yeah, it does.
It should make a difference.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's written to make that distinction.
Is that a distinction that we're actually trying to make, though? Because you can have friends that come over every week and stay at your house.
Yeah,
They just don't pay you.
I think that's permitted. That's permitted currently under our definition of family, which is your family, your relation, and up to 4 unrelated guests. So that would be permitted currently.
Okay.
So
So we have a second and a motion.
We have a motion and a second.
Yeah.
And
Time to
I'm
vote.
sorry, could you repeat it?
Approve as is, and then it goes to common council.
Pardon me?
Approve it as, or motion to approve
The
as
way
is,
it's
and then
written.
it goes to common council.
Okay, thank you.
Call for the question?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody
Nay,
opposed?
I'm nay.
701. Okay. It goes to common council in August.
Good.
yeah, just a couple weeks.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
It's a great conversation to have.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor
Aye.
say aye.
I had a quick question for the staff. I'm hearing a lot about the Fair Housing Act regulations that are going to come into play in September. I've heard they're applicable to any community which accepts HUD money or WIDA money. Does Mequon fall under that jurisdiction?
I believe so, yes.
So we accept money. So
What's that?
therefore, we'd be under those regulations and zoning rules.
Yes.
So the federal zoning rules would then apply to Mequon.
Federal zoning rules about what?
About
Yeah, we're
multiple
not
family
exempt
housing,
from-
low-income housing,